Hello, Jeff Hayes, audiobook narrator here, and welcome to part 3 of the YouTube edition of Pilgrims by M.R. Leonard. If you want to skip straight to continuing the Pilgrims audiobook, you can find the beginning of that on the timeline or in the time codes in the description of this video. Continue watching for one last interview introduction featuring just myself and the author, Michael Leonard, as we discuss our own feelings about the current cultural significance of Catholicism and Christianity in general, and how Michael envisioned Pilgrims as a part of that conversation. The Pilgrims YouTube edition will continue with part 4 in 1 week, and it will simply kick off with the audiobook itself. But if you can't wait one more week to find out how the story concludes, or if you're just enjoying this production and want to support us and the author, you can find the full audiobook on the Sound Booth audiobook platform. Look for the link in the description below, where you can also find a discount code to get 50% off the purchase price. Thanks for coming back. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel for more free audiobooks and more video content from Sound Booth Theater, and I hope you enjoy Pilgrims by M.R. Leonard. Michael, how are you feeling about the first half of the book?
Father Ambrose ends part 2 with "This changes everything." So now we get to see what it changed, and the book continues, which is how you know that some of the changes are quite shocking and conflict-full. Not happily ever after.
When I got to this point in the pre-read, I remember just being absolutely hooked. I remember, like, I just did not want to put the book down. I was so intrigued with where the story was going. I was so interested in, the main character's experience, and already he's gone through so much, and he's gone through changes personally. He's questioning everything now. He starts probably where a lot of people who are not Catholic, who might be listening to this audiobook or reading the book, probably feeling the same way, where he figured, oh, these aliens, they have some kind of ulterior motive. There's something fishy about this whole Catholic aliens thing, and he's been surprised, and he's leaning towards, wait, I think these guys are serious. I think this is legit. And not only that, maybe this whole Catholicism thing is legit as well. Because he witnesses that resurrection, and he's convinced, right? So, Michael, how are you feeling as a writer at this moment when you get to this part? Have you outlined at this point everything that you want to happen, or are you still trying to figure out what's going on as you go?
I know there's 2 schools of thought for writing. There's the pantser, where you just kind of write and see what happens. Is Matt Dinniman, I think he classifies himself as more of a pantser, which is amazing to me because of how his lengthy stories all cohere. I'm very much in the opposite camp. I do the outline thing. So I really wanted this to be what you'd call structurally the midpoint twist. It changes how we look at all the action that happened before, because the revelation that the aliens are not seemingly pretending to be Christian or just misinterpreting it, but they feel like they are direct witnesses to the resurrection of Christ. And so they feel compelled to come, which is obviously the last thing that anyone on earth, let alone my main character, Austin, was ever expecting. I knew I wanted this to be the midpoint problem, because the whole story could have ended with that twist. Like, why are the aliens here? Oh, they saw the resurrection. But what I really like to spend some time in is, okay, so the aliens are here. They're Christian. This is their explanation for why, which is fundamentally the same reason that all Christians are Christians. Fundamentally, they all believe the resurrection happened. They believe it because their data came back and they seemingly witnessed it from watching a video. And people today who are Christian would say this historical event that occurred 2,000 years ago, I believe, is more likely than not to have occurred. So I really wanted it to be the midpoint twist as I was writing this. And I had a lot of the things in mind that are coming next, that are kind of hinted at in the prologue. So that's why I kind of pulled the prologue forward, to kind of give us a sense of the stakes of these aliens coming is much different than we might have all expected. But and to maybe throw some readers off balance if they think I'm going to just use it as a cudgel against Christians, that's not the intent. So you kind of don't know which direction the book is going to take it at this stage right now. I kind of revealed that it's not a cudgel, but still, some pretty terrible stuff is in store.
This is sort of the human point of Catholicism as well, where this belief in this resurrection is kind of what starts people on the journey of Catholicism or Christianity in general. Did you have a moment recently or in the not too distant past that made you rethink about the resurrection and convinced you that perhaps this is more likely than not?
Yeah, that's actually so I would describe myself as what is often called a revert to Catholicism. So I'm 40, and in my mid 30s, I came back to being Catholic. Actually, while I was at MIT, ironically enough, like so, you'd think MIT, with if it did anything, would make you less Catholic, but it had the opposite effect on me. So I was raised Catholic growing up, and with regard to the resurrection itself, like I'm sure if you asked most Christians, they're probably Christian for a reason that they probably don't have a lot to say about the historicity of the resurrection. And that's like totally fine. That's
Mm-hmm.
not, in fact, that might be better in some ways. I mean, the if they were to read the statement both in Catholicism and I'm sure many of the Protestant denominations, the statement of faith is that Jesus rose from the dead. So they're encountering it there. But like most people in religion, and including myself, who was raised Catholic, this isn't something you tend to engage in a lot. Like a lot of things your parents tell you or your community, you kind of just go with it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest. And I think that's how most people, including myself, wind up losing their religion. Because you reach a certain age where you start kind of questioning everything, your parents, the churches you're in. And at least when I was a kid, it felt like there weren't good responses. So I went to church through college. I even like, whereas most, I'd say some people become teenagers like 13, 14. They put up such a fit about their parents taking the church. The parents stopped taking the church. I was a good boy. So I got through high school without doing that. And then I went to college. I went to a Catholic school, Boston College. So there was like on the weekend, there'd be mass, like dozens of mass times. It was kind of hard not to go to mass, but a lot of people who went their whole life at that point, their parents aren't around, so they just stopped going. I did. I graduated college and that was me. I just kind of stopped going. But along the way, I never really engaged intellectually with the faith. I just kind of went along with it. I avoided the intellectual side because while I was growing up, that was a big part of who I was. I did well in school. I was always kind of curious. And I was afraid to touch the third rail, to really investigate the reality of this religion, because I was afraid I'd come to the other end and find out it's a bunch of just superstition. It's a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of nonsense. You double click on it, and all you find is fairy tales. It's basically Santa Claus, but for adults, and we're all just pretending as a society because that just makes things easier. Don't look too hard at it. It wasn't until I was in my mid 30s and kind of the proliferation of the internet that I even encountered people who were willing to take on the question. It's just when I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, we didn't talk about this stuff and it wasn't polite. And the internet was a lot clunkier insofar it existed. And sure, I could have gone to certain libraries and checked out certain books that would have provided these answers, but I didn't even know to do that. And there were no adults in my life that were talking to do that. Meanwhile, in the last 10 years, I would say Christian apologetics has infected the interwebs and it
Mm-hmm.
got to me. I think if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I would have thought, it's a nice myth that Christians like to tell. It's a curious one because it took down the Roman Empire. Like there's a lot of myths. They don't always take down empires and have an impact 2000 years later, but that's all it is. And then when you saw academic people and intellectual people making the historical arguments, and I was a history major at Boston College, that started got my attention and caused me to take a much closer look at it. And when you really interrogate what you believe happened historically, there's a lot of faith there, if we want to put it that way. I mean, there's this famous philosophical concept that maybe you exist only in this moment and all your memories and all that stuff are completely made up. You would have no way of knowing because they're all just fake memories. So you can't, the fact that America was founded in, the Declaration of Independence, all that stuff, that's all just a memory. And your childhood, it's another memory that you created for yourself. Uh, that's like real solipsism. That's like all my lived experiences can't be trusted. But if we grant that you can trust that you've had memories and lived experiences, what if we look back in history and just kind of start double clicking on things? Like, are you certain Alexander the Great existed? I mean, why would you think that he did? And there's very good reasons to do it, but for we don't walk around questioning if the Civil War happened and if Abraham Lincoln was a US president, but people will very readily question whether Jesus even existed. And when you compare the historical evidence to that versus many other things that are uncontroversial, like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, his war with the Gauls, the outcome of the US Civil War, uh, you realize that everyone's kind of doing special pleading on a historical ground. So once I kind of realized I was doing that and could engage it directly, that became a factor in me reverting, and probably one of the chief ones. Essentially, I grew up and realized that the intellectual arguments against Christianity were a lot weaker than I had been led to believe as a teenager and a 20-year-old who thought it was just Santa Claus for adults.
Yeah, and as someone who is also not a Christian, and having been watching these debates between Christians and atheists in the same interwebs that you have, I'm seeing the same thing. That really the atheists and agnostics arguments feel a lot weaker than the Christians. Now, I have my own arguments that have nothing to do with what other people are talking about, and reasons why my mind hasn't changed. But also, I have so much more sympathy for Christianity, its philosophy. The end result of Christianity, I think, resembles my own philosophy and my own outlook on life far better than the common atheist or agnostic points of view. It's like I see, your guys' story, as a weird way to get there, but we end up in the same place. I just can't buy that part. So now it's just, for me, really inspirational to see more Christian messages get out there and reach people, because in the end, I think it's good for everybody that we engage, at the very least, engage with the Christian message and figure out why it's there and figure out what it's doing for us. And I get that sense from the aliens as well. Like, I get that sense in Pilgrims that these aliens, they truly believe everything about Christianity to its core and to its foundations, to the rules that are set forth for how to live. One thing, we were just talking earlier about my father passing away this year, and my father found Jesus again. I would say at least 10 years ago, could have been 11 years ago. I was just in Moorhead in his house, just trying to get a few more things straightened out, and it's a real big job. But one thing I found was a stack of his used checkbooks, and they were all filled with tithes. And I looked at it and I was like, well, that's where all his money went. That filled me with pride. Again, I'm not Christian, but what that represents is his care for his community. I know from talking to the other members of his church how much of an influence he was and how heartbroken they all were for him passing as well. It was a huge part of his life. And I know that when he found Jesus, that his life flipped upside down, right? He went from being bitter and upset and resentful, because a big part of what defined him as a character back then was his divorce from my mom. I don't need to necessarily get into those details, but he harbored a lot of resentment there, and his heart was heavy, and he was not living well. He had a moment that he would tell us about Jesus finally coming to talk to him directly. And he put down the pot, He put down cigarettes, he put down alcohol all at once and never touched it again. He used to say, I smoke and drink as much as I want to now that Jesus has come around, which is absolutely nothing. He dedicated his life to his faith, and he said, I'm free. I'm free now. I don't have my own desires are no longer trapping me in a life of listlessness and anger and resentment. And now I've given myself to Jesus and his way, which is at its foundation kindness and forgiveness and looking after the community and being godly, freed him. I get that sense from Virgil as well. That same holiness, Virgil and Father Ambrose. I think those are really good representatives of this faith.
In contrast to General Ferguson.
In contrast to General Ferguson, who very much reminds me, like, very cold, calculated. There's nothing that he actually says that's outright false.
Yeah.
And that's why I love that character, because he is so convincing, so logical, and he represents what runs our societies more nowadays than we would, I think, like to believe. But it's all logical. It's all calculated, but he's still wrong.
If aliens showed up and said they're Catholic, I mean, would you believe them? That's pretty outrageous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically one of the arguments he makes. It's a good point. But then they're acting so strange in a way that, like you described your father, like ways that are so different than how you would act if you weren't. One of the reasons I think this book is here now, besides the fact that I only wrote it now, but like we think of more, the artistic way of why is this book arriving now? Uh, if you had asked me in 1999, when the internet existed, as the internet becomes more pervasive and people have more access to information, we walk around with the supercomputer in our pocket, and that was somewhat foreseeable in 1999. We kind of knew that eventually you'd have the world's information at your fingertips. I probably would have predicted that fewer people would be Christian or religious in general, but definitely Christian. And here we are in 2025, and we're talking about, these green shoots of a Christian revival. I mean, 10 years ago, it was the atheist position was like, look at those idiot Christians. Now, I think most top atheists, the public speakers, the public intellectuals on the topic are like, regrettably, I'm not a Christian, but like that Christianity, it's got a lot to offer. I mean, that's like a total sea change in tone and vibe. And so
Absolutely.
just like the internet, if I had to predict, would I think lead to less faith, not more. And I don't know, it's at least in my case and in many other people's cases, it's kind of having the opposite reaction. If aliens came, it would lead to less faith, or at least less faith in Christianity in particular. And my book is kind of like, well, not exactly. It might
Right.
have kind of not universally, but at least having somewhat of the opposite effect, especially if the aliens themselves are Christian. That really throws things for a loop. So, again, this is the midpoint twist that where we are in the book. The aliens, we find out why they're Christian. They've been acting Christian, but now we have their explanation, which it somewhat tracks, although people can poke holes in that too, and we'll find characters poking holes in that in the next chapter. So it's not totally bulletproof. But even though they have God in their life in this world, in the Christian worldview, that doesn't mean you're free. Like they're still sinners. There'll still be errors. There'll still be trials. There'll still be tribulations. So that's why we're in the middle of the book. So I'm sure your father, with that big change, 10 years ago, life didn't stop. There was still issues to be dealt with. It's just kind of how you handle them and how you approach them and how you contextualize them. And I like that we live in a time where maybe people, I think less so today, would have written that off as like kind of, I don't know, wish fulfillment on the person's part. And now there's a lot more smart people and young people, interestingly, people who are very exposed to the internet, ironically, that are kind of like, I don't know if I'm convinced, but I think there's some really good reasons to see the world the way your father reads it. I don't think it's just like a hope a copium. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I think there's actually might be a good reason to look in the world at the way he does. And there's obviously clear benefits for him, but like if it's also true, isn't that really compelling too? And I'm really pleased that that's the environment we're living in today. And I think it can make you enjoy this book, even if you have no religion and are hostile to religion. It's at least shining a light on some of the cultural and sociological trends that are happening as we speak.
How often do you see someone renounce Christianity and become relieved and become a brighter person, a brighter, warmer person with all of a sudden there's hope. It is breaking free in a way that it's almost like they're fugitive. Whereas when people find faith, you see more stories like my dad, where a weight has been lifted from them. What we see as most of the time, the mood that someone is in when they renounce their faith versus when they find it. Now, obviously, there's got to be examples of, freedom where, like, often people associate the faith itself with the people in whatever establishment they're a part of being oppressive, right? And from that perspective, I can get it. Like, hey, you're like, let's say you're going to a Catholic school where the nuns are hitting your knuckles with a ruler.
Let's be more on the nose. The Catholic sexual abuse issues.
Absolutely, right?
People who have been victimized by priests, or just even knowing that the priest that you liked was a potential child abuser. I mean, that many people have been traumatized by religion, and not for small reasons. It's real
Right.
trauma that needs to be really contended with.
The problem there is conflating the faith with the people who are not, who portend to be authorities within that faith, abusing that power, and or simply not having a proper understanding of the fundamentals, putting that bad taste in people's mouth when they hear about the faith. I think that there's a difference there between freeing yourself from actual oppressive people and freeing yourself from the religion itself. A lot of the time, our logic and reason causes us harm, causes us resentment, causes us anger and suspicion, and rightfully so when you just look at the cold facts of the moment. But what faith, I think, does is creates a future of hope.
In Catholicism, it's actually a sin to despair. It's called the sin of despair, because essentially you've been told how the story ends. God saves the world. If I were to say my book has a happy ending, that doesn't mean from here to the end it's going to be nice. A lot of terrible things are going to happen. So it's the same with the story that we're living in. So hope is foundational to the Christian worldview.
No matter what the truth is, like, of our origins or whatever, I think what's more important is a story that inspires us to behave better, to take care of each other, and to make the world a better place.
Jeff, I had a question. I mean, when I sent you this book, it's not lit RPG. What prompted you to want to take this on as an audio project? Because it's outside your field. It's kind of a ridiculous premise. You did read the whole thing before you agreed to work with me. So, what made you notice it in light of everything we've been talking about?
Well, I think first of all, you kind of already hit the nail on the head. It's completely out of my wheelhouse. It's a strange premise. And those are always the projects that I'm most attracted to. I need to dial back personally as a businessman from taking on more and more projects that are just completely out of left field for me, because that's just not the way business works, right? I'm supposed to kind of like make sure that I'm serving the people that have been buying stuff from me in the first place. But I think spiritually, this project was really good for me, and it's because what we were talking about before. I think that this conversation between atheists and Christians is becoming more honest, and because I am at least emotionally feeling more in common with Christianity, and because I see Christianity as more of a force for good in the world than I ever did. When I was a teenager, when I was younger, I was very much on the militant atheist kind of road, where, like you said, like, oh, this ridiculous superstition stuff is if poisoning people's minds and all this. I felt like Pilgrims did such a great job of approaching this question honestly, and presenting a literally alien culture who adopts this philosophy and this belief system, doing their best to be good beings, right? And contrasting that against humanity's skepticism and cynicism, right? I think it's a good demonstration, and I just found it inspiring. And not only that, you did a great job writing it. It's concise. It was a page turner. I could not stop, like I said earlier, and those are the kinds of books I want to work on. The kind that really get to something important, and has a strong belief without being. I also don't feel like it's. I also feel like you question Christianity enough in it that it doesn't feel like being beat over the head with a philosophy. It really feels like you're trying to present two sides and allowing the reader to decide for themselves. So I don't know. I feel like it's a piece of work, a novel that's done right, and I just like it's hard for me to turn down just good material.
It's had a pretty good debut. This is my debut novel. Where it's about 7 months, almost it's 6.5 months since publication. Uh, we've sold quite a number of copies. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people emailing me. I probably get an email every other day asking when's the sequel coming out. I loved it so much. So, and I that's what I wanted to do. No one wants to read propaganda. I think if I had written Christian propaganda, I wouldn't have people sending me those emails,
Yeah.
even the Christians, because like you can get better Christian propaganda elsewhere than me. I did want to see something as a reader. I wanted to see people who honestly held these views contend with people who don't. And I don't have to say who's right necessarily, but watching that conflict is way more interesting than like a straw or like a cardboard cutout of a Christian versus someone who's got a solid atheistic worldview. I mean, that's no fun. Everyone wants to see a fair fight. So I hope I delivered that, and that's maybe what kept you interested and kept the readers. But there will be more to come in this space. There will be more books to follow. Uh, you know, Again, the midpoint twist of just the first novel is that the aliens saw the resurrection, but there's way more. That's not the end of the story. There's what do you do when Christian aliens show up? Like a lot of things change, and there'll be a lot of conflict and tribulation as a result, because that's the kind of world we live in. That's just a fact. So uh, we're going to keep letting the story unfold, and I hope Jeff, you'll be here for the long run as we get this series out to the world.
I think I will. I'm looking forward to that sequel myself. All right, so this is the midpoint of the story. The last 50% is in front of you. This is going to be our last interview introduction to the YouTube editions of Pilgrims. Next week, it's going to just start off right with the continuation of the story. But Michael, it's been great having these discussions with you to tack on to the beginnings of these parts. And I'm looking forward to more discussions in the future and talking to more people about this book.
Yeah, and to the people listening, there's all sorts of ways to experience Pilgrims. You can get the print edition. You can purchase the audiobook in its purest form through Sound Booth Theater. They have the file all together. Some people prefer to the YouTube because they like the interviews as well as that platform to do it. But if you like it, then please share these videos. Share them to people that you know. Share it because we're putting it out there so we can get more readers, more people interested.
Yep. If you want to support us, go to soundbooth.app and you can purchase Pilgrims there. And if you look in the description below, you'll find a discount code to make it just that much easier for you. Please enjoy. Sound Booth Theater presents Pilgrims, written by M.R. Leonard, featuring Annie Ellicott as Secretary Ramirez, Lieutenant Wu, and Claire, Gary Francis Furlong as Father Ambrose, and Justin Thomas James as Virgil. Narrated by Jeff Hayes. Part 3, Chapter 21. Austin was alone. Cynthia and Liam nowhere to be seen. The old man stood behind the counter, arranging the lottery tickets. Austin went to him, elated, the deathly blow undone. Seeing him approach, the old man said, "Why, Austin?" Austin's heart began to race. It was happening again. He tried to run, but he couldn't. "Why didn't you stop her?" The old man's empty, lifeless eyes bore into him. Austin looked down. Liam's gun was in his hand. He leveled it. "Do it," the old man demanded. The gun grew heavier. A woman came at the old man from the side, her belly swollen, a Fed coin machine in her hands. Austin pointed the gun at her, his finger on the trigger, but he couldn't squeeze. She mocked him with a smile as the machine came down. The old man's skull broke open, drowning the store in a river of blood. Austin's eyes shot open. The old man had found him once more, tormenting him in his sleep, just like he had every night since Austin had returned to Earth and been stuffed in this cell. Austin touched his face. For the millionth time, he wondered how long he'd been here. There were no windows, no distinction between night and day. Time was marked solely by the 2 flavorless meals that slid through the slot in the metal door and the growing length of his haggard beard. Haggard like his sanity. "DeSantis?" The muffled voice came from the other side of the steel door. Austin braced himself, preparing for another hallucination. "I have some good news." The voice was clearer now, louder, and Austin began to fear this would be the worst one yet. But then he heard the bolts releasing, and the door slid open for the first time since he'd been placed there. General Ferguson stood in the doorway, a towel over his shoulder and a wooden box in his hand. Austin blinked, unsure if he could believe what he was seeing. "I convinced them not to kill you." "Are you real?" Austin's voice cracked, a casualty of extreme underuse. A faint smile curled the corners of General Ferguson's mouth. He took the towel from his shoulder and began to roll it up, carefully and deliberately, like it was origami. When he was done, he snapped it at Austin. Ah! Austin cried out in pain as the towel stung his cheek. "Does that answer your question?" Without waiting for an answer, General Ferguson took a seat on the foot of Austin's cot. Austin sat up, removing his legs from the woolen blanket and putting his bare feet onto the cold floor. "How long have I been here?" 5 weeks and 5 days. Austin touched his beard. 40 days. And yet it seemed he'd been there 100 times as long. "Did it work?" "Did what work?" General Ferguson placed the wooden box on the cot, arranging it so that it rested perfectly flat on the blanket. "The video I took. Did you use it to show China it wasn't a superweapon? That it was just a church?" "Oh, that." General Ferguson opened the box. "A lot has happened, DeSantis." Despite the ever-present chill of the cell, sweat had pooled under Austin's armpits. "What do you mean, oh that? What's happened?" Austin's voice was stronger now, finding its old rhythm. General Ferguson took a piece of soap out of the box and reached over to the metal commode, the cramped cell so small he barely needed to lean. "I nearly died trying to get that video. Austin's words echoed off the concrete walls, and his mind went to the chancel. The giant diplomat looming over him, the violet-headed diplomat coming his way. He'd thought they were going to kill him, but before he knew it, Virgil was putting him on a sled back to Earth. Virgil's head had turned from pale blue to crimson, and he hadn't spoken so much as a single word to Austin the whole ride back.
It discharged in your pocket, DeSantis.
General Ferguson ran the faucet atop the metal commode, wetting the bar of soap.
We couldn't use any of it.
Austin's stomach dropped. I failed?
Yes.
General Ferguson pulled a brush from the box and rubbed it on the soap, generating a milky lather. But what about China? Austin's head became light, and he began to sag, the light fading from his eyes. Why haven't they attacked?
There are riots in China.
General Ferguson grabbed Austin's face with his hand and began to lather it up.
Christians are marching, demanding they be allowed to worship openly. The regime is afraid to attack them, lest the aliens intervene. We're on the verge of another Tiananmen. And this time it doesn't look like the CCP's going to make it to the other side.
Austin remained still, despite the tickle of the soap.
About 15 minutes after he emerged in D.C., the rest of the delegation arrived at the Vatican. They weren't back a few hours before Pope Stephen released the aliens' video. The whole world has seen it.
Austin's eyes widened. Father Ambrose? Was he with them?
Yes.
General Ferguson rinsed the brush in the sink, cleaning off the remaining lather.
The video sparked a global frenzy.
General Ferguson placed the brush back into the wooden box and pulled out a straight-edge razor.
The junta in Brazil swore allegiance to the Pope, saying that as the largest Catholic nation, it was their duty to defend Christendom.
General Ferguson turned Austin's head, bringing the blade to his right cheek.
The UK is about to vote to become a republic. People are thinking the monarch's role as head of the Church of England is a major liability.
General Ferguson moved the blade down Austin's cheek in one smooth motion, the hair giving way to the sharpened blade.
Every day at noon, the 12 alien crafts over world cities broadcast the Our Father.
General Ferguson brought the blade down again, his dark eyes focused on Austin, like a sculptor perfecting a bust.
They play it so loud no one can even think for a 300-mile radius. When the one over Medina goes off, Saudi Arabia descends into chaos, the apostasy of it all shoved right in their face.
Finished shaving the whole right side of Austin's face, the general rinsed off the blade for the first time.
The hardliners want King Salman to try and shoot the craft down, even though they know an attack is suicide. But he refuses to destroy his nation and start a world war. And to thank him, he's met by one coup attempt after another. Won't be long before they finally take him out.
If I failed... Austin's mind returned to himself, the rest of the world nothing more than an abstraction in his cave. Why am I still alive? General Ferguson stopped rinsing the blade and looked at Austin.
Because I saved you,
he said, as his mouth curled up at the sides.
Again.
The general let the revelation hang there, as if to elicit a reaction from Austin. But he was too exhausted to be upset.
Ramirez wanted you dead. But I went over her head, straight to the president. Told him that we need you, that soon it would become clear. And now that day has come.
Need me? Austin's voice broke, ashamed that a part of him felt grateful.
You're my weapon, DeSantis,
the general said as he started on the left side of Austin's face.
Our only hope in the fight ahead.
This close to General Ferguson, Austin noticed how emaciated he was. The veins popping out of his hand, the outline of the bones in his legs. He realized he'd never seen the general eat, as if he didn't need calories but simply sustained himself on hate. Fight? There won't be a fight. You saw the video. They're Christians. They saw Jesus rise from the dead. The general raised his eyebrows at him, continuing to move the blade deftly down his skin.
Did they?
Of course they did. Locked away in the cell, Austin had a lot of time to think about it. If you were there and saw how seriously they took the video...
I was there, DeSantis.
General Ferguson flicked the razor and a chunk of Austin's mustache disappeared.
I saw the giant church, the ornate pageant the aliens put on to impress you and a bunch of Catholic priests. It's all a parlor trick, a ruse meant to deceive the gullible and ensnare the overeager.
A trick? Austin's voice faltered. General Ferguson smiled.
They have a video. Of what exactly? A man on a cross? A person coming out of a grave? They traveled across the galaxy, DeSantis. How hard could it be to fake a video?
All this time he'd been so sure of what he'd seen. But what the general said, the way the old man came to visit him and made him question what was real, perhaps the general was right. Suppose they did fake the video. For 5 years I watched you on TV, Austin said, as General Ferguson carefully shaved the last bits of his mustache, saying the premise was true, that the Pilgrims could have blown the crust off our planet ages ago. If the Pilgrims intend to harm us, why haven't they blown us up already? Why go to such lengths to make something like this up?
You're right.
General Ferguson moved the razor to Austin's chin, attacking the last remaining hair on his face.
I don't know what their endgame is, but I know this. Power such as theirs doesn't remain sheathed for long.
He grabbed the towel and wiped Austin's face clean. Reaching up, Austin felt the results. It was smooth, like a newborn's cheek.
The world is on the brink, DeSantis. Something is going to give. When it does, we'll be powerless to stop these aliens. Save for you.
Not sure what to believe anymore, Austin only shook his head. How?
The alien robot trusts you. That misplaced trust is our weapon. Humanity's only hope against total annihilation.
He didn't want to be a weapon. He didn't want any of this. Virgil doesn't care about me. The whole way back to Earth, he never said a word.
He's calling for you now, DeSantis.
General Ferguson folded up the soiled towel into a neat square.
He's standing outside the cylinder in D.C.
Austin shot upright, hating the hope that filled him with that news. He didn't deserve it after his betrayal. He is?
Yes.
General Ferguson smiled smugly to himself.
And now Ramirez looks like a fool, having advised the president to kill our inside man.
Are you taking me to Virgil? Austin said, ignoring General Ferguson's machinations.
Of course I'm taking you to him, DeSantis.
General Ferguson stood up.
That's why we needed you clean. A soldier never goes into battle with an unclean weapon.
Austin felt his heart racing again, a blend of anticipation and unease coursing through him. What do you want me to do?
Just what you've done before. Ingratiate yourself. Make the robot trust you. When the time to strike is upon us, you'll know. Then we can fulfill the deal. Charges dropped, and a new life for you and your mother.
His mother. Austin hadn't forgotten about her. Thinking of her suffering, not knowing what happened to her son, weighed heavily on him. Can I talk to her? Let her know I'm okay?
Of course not.
General Ferguson was so close that Austin could feel his breath against his face. It was both the breath of his savior and of his tormentor.
America has many enemies, and if they found out the kind of access you have with the aliens, you'd only put her in danger.
Austin winced at the thought of doing his mother any more harm. What if you're wrong? He asked, unable to keep the doubt he felt from surfacing. He didn't know the Pilgrims, but he knew Virgil. And from everything he'd seen of the alien robot, he couldn't believe that Virgil's intentions weren't genuine. What if the Pilgrims are sincere Christians and have no intention for war? The feline smile returned to General Ferguson's face.
You'll see, DeSantis. Soon the aliens will make their move. And when they do, you'll know why I'm the way that I am.
Chapter 22.
Habeas corpus.
The Latin drowned out the helicopter's roar, so loud it was like the whole world was vibrating.
What's it saying?
The black shirt sitting across from Austin asked.
It's saying, present the body.
The words echoed back to Austin in his headset. Instead of replying, the black shirt adjusted his rifle. Austin looked out the open door of the Black Hawk as the Washington Monument passed by. They were flying up the Potomac on their way to Rock Creek Park, Austin's first time on a helicopter, despite having been to space twice.
Daniels!
The black shirt manning the minigun addressed the black shirt across from Austin.
You seen the god nuts yet? Just from the ground. Take a look starboard in about 30 seconds.
As the helicopter passed the Lincoln Memorial, its entire chassis rolled 10 degrees. They were heading north up Rock Creek, the tributary for which the park got its name. Looking to the left, Austin could see the brownstones of Georgetown passing by as they made their way to the Pilgrim craft that loomed over the city like a leviathan.
Shit! It's like they're multiplying down there,
Daniels said. Tens of thousands of people pushed up against a steel wall around the perimeter of Rock Creek Park, the crowd so large it backed up into neighboring streets.
Been 4 incursions already today.
The black shirt manning the minigun said, training his gun down on the crowd.
8 tangos, KIA. We did those nuts a favor. Sent them straight to God. I'd sure love to fire a few bursts.
The black shirt manning the minigun grunted.
Thin them out a bit.
The helicopter descended over the park barricades. The leaves had fallen off the trees since Austin had been locked away, leaving just the barren branches to filter Austin's view of the ground. He caught sight of a group of regulars standing in the creek, their uniforms laid on the side, one dunking another in the water.
Was that Peterson?
Daniels asked, incredulous.
Yup. This God stuff is spreading through the base like a virus. Every time you turn around, someone is getting baptized or stalking off the base to go to church. There's never been a shortage of morons in the Army.
The helicopter slowed, landing on Military Road, the main boulevard that bisected the park. Daniels led Austin out and took him to a waiting Humvee, another black shirt standing in front.
Welcome back,
the black shirt said.
We missed you around here.
Austin recognized the Mississippi twang immediately. It was the black shirt he'd met in the locker room over a month ago. She was looking at him now, her green eyes glistening in the December sun. Missed me? He asked, unable to keep the grin from his face.
Sure,
she replied, opening the Humvee door.
Base isn't the same without you.
He got in, and she followed, sitting next to him in the back. The Humvee pulled away with a jolt, bound for the cylinder. The barricades had grown substantially since Austin had been gone. There were now 3 lines of defense taking up the entirety of the golf course, the outermost laced with razor wire and guard towers, the inner 2 fortified with sandbags and machine gun nests. Between each barricade was a sea of regulars, so many that Austin wondered if the Army hadn't shoved a whole brigade into this base within a base. I thought of you when I was up there, Austin finally admitted, having just worked up the courage as the Humvee made it through the last layer of defenses. She squinted at him with her green eyes. You know, in space.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He cleared his throat, feeling heat creep up his neck. I, hope you'll get to go up there too one day. Holding his gaze, she brought her hand to touch his briefly. It was the best he'd felt in a long time.
Habeas corpus.
The ear-piercing demand broke the moment as the Humvee stopped in the middle of the 10th hole fairway. Austin saw Virgil standing outside the cylinder, his head glowing a pale blue. Virgil! Austin gasped. He turned to his beautiful captor.
Well?
She said, tilting her head.
What are you waiting for?
He burst out the Humvee door and ran down the fairway.
I am very glad to see you again, Austin,
Virgil said in his sonorous voice as Austin closed the distance between them.
Please, come with me.
Austin followed Virgil into the hallway, eager to put the chaos of the military camp behind him. He couldn't believe how familiar it felt to be here. If someone had told him a few months ago that he'd be a regular on board an alien spacecraft, he would have laughed in their face. Within a few moments, he was approaching the silver wall, and it was folding away to reveal the Victorian living room,
Austin!
Father Ambrose sprang up from the sofa and ran over to him, throwing his hand on Austin's shoulder.
I'm so glad to see you. We were so worried.
Worried? Austin asked as Virgil strode into the room. Both of you?
Of course, Austin. I am your host, and as such I have a deep responsibility for you, an obligation of the highest importance in Pilgrim culture. I became worried when we could not locate you for quite some time.
You didn't write, you didn't call.
Father Ambrose joined in.
When Virgil told me even the Pilgrims didn't know where you were, I got scared. I know what that crazy general did to you on the ship.
You both came here looking for me? He said, his voice trembling. Austin had awoken that day in his cell, sure the world had forgotten about him. But these two had kept him in their minds.
All the way from Rome.
Father Ambrose smiled.
I rode the Vatican space elevator up to the mothership and then came down on this one to D.C. I know that isn't a trip across the galaxy, but that's still a pretty big hop for an old man like me.
Austin laughed, the sound strange to his ears. He'd barely smiled since he'd returned to Earth.
Come, you must be hungry.
Father Ambrose ushered Austin over to the wall where the table of food was usually located. As they approached, the mahogany wall folded away and the ivory table appeared with 2 plates of pasta doused in an amber sauce, green herbs sprinkled atop.
We were just in Rome, so I had Virgil prepare bucatini alla matriciana, a local specialty. You'll love it, Austin. The tomatoes taste like they were freshly picked from the garden. Nothing like the garbage the army feeds you.
Father Ambrose put the plate in Austin's hand. As Austin dug into the meal, a robot no bigger than a deck of cards came out from the underside of the table. It gripped the surface of the table like a bug, retrieving a hunk of Parmigiano Reggiano with 2 free legs, and then approached their plates with a silent grace. Rapidly, but with great care, it shaved the cheese, dusting the pasta until the red sauce of the bucatini was almost completely obscured.
Amazing, isn't it, Austin? These little guys are the ones preparing our wonderful meals.
Austin's eyes grew wet with gratitude. The past few weeks, the black shirts had only fed him slop through a slot in the door.
Austin,
Virgil said, his voice gentle but prodding.
Where have you been these past 40 days?
Austin felt his stomach tense. These two had traveled around the globe to ensure he was safe. How could he tell them he was a murderer, locked in a cell while the authorities debated whether to execute him for his crimes? Not wanting to see the looks on their faces when they found out, he instead said, I thought you two had forgotten about me.
Austin,
Father Ambrose said, putting down the plate of food.
Of course not.
After the chancel, you sent me back here alone. He turned his attention to Virgil. And you didn't say anything to me the whole ride back. I thought I was being punished.
I'm sorry, Austin, but I was deep in prayer. Every time I look upon the risen Christ, I can't help it. I must immediately give thanks to our Lord.
Austin reminded himself he was talking to an advanced AI, one the Pilgrims probably programmed to react a specific way to that video, his whole existence controlled, no agency of his own.
Come, Austin. Let's sit down.
Father Ambrose gestured toward the sofas.
I still do not understand, Austin,
Virgil said as he approached the couch.
Why did you not reach out?
You never told me how to get a hold of you.
There are many ways to reach me, Austin. You could have come to the elevator and simply spoken. I would have heard it. Or you could have composed an email and sent it to yourself. I would have seen the digital footprint.
He would have never thought to reach Virgil by emailing himself, but he got the point. The aliens' reach really was as vast as General Ferguson said. They saw everything, as long as tech was involved. Austin had fallen off the grid, and considering the Pilgrims' awesome power, that had to be an extraordinary thing to do. He knew Virgil wanted an explanation, and Austin was desperate to give him a satisfactory one, but there was no way he could tell him the truth. The truth is, I've been avoiding you.
What?
Father Ambrose's glasses nearly fell off his face.
Why?
I betrayed Virgil's trust, Father. I told the military the Pilgrim's secret. Father Ambrose's head darted between Austin and Virgil, his forehead creasing.
What secret?
I told the military the Pilgrims are soldiers in my debriefing, Austin said, slumping his head. It was a partial truth, and he hoped it would be enough. He sniffed. I'm sorry, Virgil. Please forgive me.
I cannot forgive you.
I understand. The words seeped out of Austin like air from a balloon.
No, Austin, you do not understand. I cannot forgive you because you did not betray me. One cannot forgive someone for a wrong that did not occur.
Austin looked up, confused.
Virgil?
Father Ambrose asked, still stuck on the revelation.
The Pilgrims are soldiers?
Yes, Father. Pilgrims may live much longer than humans, but the journey from the Pilgrim homeworld to Earth is a long one filled with many trials. The crew must be disciplined and able to work within a strict chain of command.
Oh, that makes sense,
Father Ambrose said, diffused.
It's no different than a ship at sea.
Yes, Father, that is an apt comparison.
But Austin, why did you think that was such a big deal that you avoided us?
Austin took a breath, trying to gather his thoughts. I didn't want the military to think the Pilgrims are more of a threat than they really are. But after the umpteenth interrogation, I just let it slip.
The military is more than capable of being paranoid without your help. A few words from you aren't going to make a difference.
Austin's muscles relaxed. It seemed to have worked. I can't believe I avoided you over that. I feel silly now. Father Ambrose took off his glasses and started cleaning them on his shirt.
I suppose if we're confessing things, I came here to see you, Austin, and confirm that you're okay. And I'm thrilled to see that you are.
Father Ambrose put his glasses back on, a pained look on his face.
But Virgil was also giving me a ride back to the United States. It's time for me to get back to my observatory.
What? Austin couldn't help his surprise. You're the Vatican's chief astronomer. Shouldn't you be right here? Isn't this like your Super Bowl? Father Ambrose smiled, but didn't laugh.
I observe the stars and collect meteorites. My involvement here was always a bit accidental. A quick decision by Pope Stephen to fill out a delegation. Now that we know why the Pilgrims are here, there isn't much use for an astronomer like me, and my absence has placed a considerable burden on my staff. It's time I relieved it.
Austin hadn't expected to find Father Ambrose waiting for him, but now that he was here, his sudden departure became that much harder to swallow. He'd missed the man. That makes no sense. You're the expert on space.
This isn't about space, Austin. It's about doctrine. Are the Pilgrims fallen? Can they participate in the sacraments? Do we add the video they provided to the Gospels? These are the questions being asked, and there are others in the church better placed to answer them than me.
Austin stood up from the sofa, his brows knitted together. I thought the whole point was to have an inspection so that you could have Mass in the ship. What's so hard about that? Virgil glided in front of Austin and stood next to Father Ambrose.
Yes, Austin, that is our deepest desire. To be close to our Lord, to have the Eucharistic presence upon our ship. But our Lord has invested his holy church with the authority to decide on such matters, and we shall await her decision.
How long will that take?
Years, decades, centuries.
Father Ambrose shrugged.
The church has a lot of doctrine it needs to develop. This isn't just some light switch you flip.
The Pilgrims traveled across the galaxy. And you ask them to wait?
We are prepared to wait as long as necessary, Austin.
The church, the Pilgrims, they measured time in decades, centuries. But Austin didn't have that long.
It's not like we can't all keep in touch.
Father Ambrose walked back over to the plates of pasta.
Come on, let's at least enjoy a meal together before we part.
Austin considered protesting, the urge to convince Father Ambrose to stay tugging at him. but it didn't seem like it would do much good. He could feel time slipping away as he nodded and took his food. It was an excellent meal. The tomatoes really did taste like they were fresh from the garden. Father Ambrose and Austin ate while Virgil watched, a few robotic comments intermixed. When they were done, they stood up and exited the Victorian living room. As they walked down the dark hallway toward the exit, Austin stole a glance back, wondering if this was the last time he'd ever see that comforting space.
Father Ambrose,
General Ferguson growled as the cylinder wall unfolded. He stood on the fairway with a platoon of blackshirts by his side.
You are in violation of 19 U.S. Code, Section 1459. Failure to enter the United States at a designated border crossing.
Yes. It's good to be back in the good old U.S. of A.
General Ferguson raised an eyebrow.
Arrest him,
he commanded. 3 blackshirts advanced. Before they could reach the priest, Virgil leapt in front of them.
Nolite sacerdote matingere!
Virgil's voice had changed, now a bass so low it was like a concussion grenade, and his head had turned a furious crimson. It felt like Austin's friend had disappeared, an angry pilgrim automaton in his place. "He said, 'Do not touch the priest!'" Austin shouted, afraid of what would happen if the blackshirts didn't comply. "You need to leave Father Ambrose alone!"
Father Ambrose is in violation of U.S. law,
General Ferguson said, undeterred.
He will be placed under arrest.
But the blackshirts held still, seemingly unsure of what to do with the alien robot in front of them. "Don't do this! You're going to start a war!"
Please, I don't want there to be violence. I'll cooperate.
General Ferguson raised his hands, signaling for the blackshirts to stand down. Virgil, however, kept his arms outstretched, ready to act.
The priest will be confined to the base while we refer his case to Customs and Border Protection.
General Ferguson addressed Virgil directly.
If he comes with us willingly, they won't put their hands on him. But I will not let him go, no matter what you say or do.
The fairway fell into an icy silence, every weapon trained on the machine. Virgil stood there unmoving, his body poised to strike. Austin fixed his gaze on Virgil's dome, desperate for a sign of what he was thinking. All their fates were tied to what he did next. But Virgil's head just glowed steady, bathing the field in that dreaded crimson hue. Chapter 23. The morning sun glinted off the FLIR lens of a parked Abrams tank a little way ahead as Austin walked down Military Road. The debriefers had kept him up all night in that sweaty boys' locker room, not letting him rest until they went over every detail of what had happened in the cylinder. There was no sign of General Ferguson, no check-in to see how Austin fared, no feline smile to put him in his servile place. Instead, there were only lingering questions. Why had the general nearly started a war over a petty crime? Only Father Ambrose's pleading and Virgil's acquiescence had saved humanity from the brink. The mystery nagged at Austin as he put one foot in front of the other. He'd been confined to Rock Creek Park Base and ordered to report to a FEMA trailer on Military Road where he could get some rest. But Father Ambrose was caged somewhere, and he couldn't sleep until he knew the priest was safe. Rubbing his arms to coax some warmth back into them, Austin spotted 2 blackshirts standing guard in front of a FEMA trailer. The rest of the trailers were unattended. He remembered Father Ambrose mentioning they'd put him in a FEMA trailer before, and figured this was as likely a place as any for them to keep him.
You hear about Jaden?
The shorter blackshirt's voice carried down the road as Austin approached unnoticed.
No. What?
The taller blackshirt replied.
He didn't make it. Bullets severed his carotid.
Sheesh. Killed by some god-crazy civvies,
the taller blackshirt said, pulling down the front of his balaclava to reveal his face.
I thought they were supposed to be peaceful.
Apparently not, when you get between them and their god.
Austin eased into the gap between 2 trailers just a few dozen yards away from where the blackshirts were standing.
It's okay, though. I heard Sarge baptized him in the creek right before the incursion.
He did?
Yep.
That's insane.
The taller one shook his head.
I can't believe the Jesus freaks got Sarge.
The shorter black shirt leaned against the trailer door. This god shit is running through the base like a virus.
If the aliens are on God's team, then I'm on the other one.
The taller black shirt adjusted the grip on his rifle.
I don't trust those three-legged freaks for a second.
Amen to that, brother. Austin wanted to stay there and listen to these two talking about the fissures running through the base. Anything to avoid confronting them and risking the limited freedom he had at this moment. But there was only one way forward. Taking a fortifying breath, he stepped into view. Whoa, who the hell are you? The shorter black shirt leveled his rifle at Austin's face. I'm here to see the priest, Austin said, his mouth suddenly dry.
On whose authority?
The taller black shirt asked. The black shirt had basically confirmed Father Ambrose was inside. Austin fought the urge to pump his fist in the air. Instead, he said, General Ferguson's. The two black shirts laughed. Ah, my ass! The shorter one took a step forward. Get the hell out of here. Austin's heart raced. It was now or never. Inepti! He yelled. Nonna intelligitis me hicrem magni momentis suscepisse! The shorter black shirt straightened almost immediately. Sinite me introire, alioquin enim panitebit. Nunc eamus! Austin paused. Their guns were lowering, drooping down. Nunc amentes! Austin pressed, letting his face flush with anger. I think that's General Ferguson's translator, the shorter black shirt said. Who the hell else would I be? Austin took a step forward, pointing his finger at the shorter one's face. And unless you want to be processed, you'd better let me in right now. Pulling his balaclava back over his face, the taller one gave the shorter one a nod. Once the door was open, Austin stepped inside. They shut the door behind him, probably glad to see him gone. Austin took in the austere nature of the place. There was a small bed with a thin sheet along the left wall, a phone booth-sized bathroom in the opposite corner, and a fold-out table with two benches. Sitting at the table, still dressed in his clerical clothes, was Father Ambrose, an open sleeve of saltines in front of him and a mischievous grin on his face.
What did you say to those two?
Austin returned the grin. Just that I was here on important business, and if they didn't let me in, there'd be hell to pay.
Inepti?
Father Ambrose raised an eyebrow.
Was the name-calling really necessary?
Austin sat down at the table and shrugged. Sometimes it helps to get a little creative with your punctuation, Father. Father Ambrose released a hearty laugh, one that lessened the sting of the December chill. Yet Austin noticed the twinkle in his eyes had dulled, like a shirt laundered too many times.
I'm glad to see you, Austin.
Austin thought back to how Father Ambrose had come looking for him when the general had attacked him, how he'd traveled around the world to see that Austin was safe. This was the least Austin could do. Are you doing okay? Father Ambrose played with a saltine in his hand.
To be honest, I've been better.
Austin recognized the priest's deflation, the pain of being under the government's thumb, powerless to do even the most basic things. This is bullshit, Father. Just General Ferguson doing it because he can.
Yes, it's unfortunate. But you know how governments are with their rules. It'll all get sorted out in the end.
Austin flashed back to the warehouse, its floor covered in bodies. That was one way the government sorted things out in the end. You're not worried about being locked up here? Father Ambrose smiled and then took a small bite of the saltine.
The cuisine's a bit pedestrian, but I've been in Rome the past month and a half, so I've got no right to complain.
Austin studied Father Ambrose's expression, searching for any sign he might be putting on a brave face. But he appeared sincere. What is bothering you, then?
You heard those two guarding the door. If the aliens are on God's team, then I'm on the other one. What a terrible thing to say.
Austin shifted uncomfortably on the hard plastic bench. You can't blame them for thinking the video is fake. You know how advanced the Pilgrims are. Faking the video would be easy.
That's true. The Pilgrims certainly have the means to fake a video. But they didn't just give the Vatican some film footage. They gave us petabytes of data. Observations of Earth from that time. Things we can verify in the archaeological, geological, and astronomical record. So far, everything we've scrutinized checks out.
Austin flashed back to his cell, General Ferguson with a blade to his face. He'd made the Pilgrims' evidence sound so flimsy. "Well, there you go, Father," he said, his shoulder lifting slightly. "As the evidence emerges, the holdouts will come around." Father Ambrose's expression remained unchanged.
"I'd agree with you, if it was only ever about the evidence."
Austin tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Father Ambrose took off his glasses and started cleaning them.
"The evidence has always been good, Austin, even before the Pilgrims showed up. Did you know that we have more evidence attesting to Jesus' existence than we do for Alexander the Great? Yet you don't hear people doubting whether Alexander the Great existed. And as for the resurrection itself, scholars have spilled oceans of ink trying to come up with a naturalistic explanation that conforms with the universally agreed upon historical facts. But they've basically come up dry."
Unsure what to say, Austin watched as Father Ambrose wiped his lenses with his shirt sleeve, noticing for the first time how worn his clothing was. When the priest carefully put his glasses back on, he looked Austin in the eye.
"The point is, this wasn't some legend we were asking people to believe. This was a historical event, one for which compelling evidence is readily available to anyone with an internet connection. But people don't bother to look. So why should a video of Christ literally walking out of his tomb make any difference?"
"Because it's a video, Father. Seeing is believing."
"Okay."
His gaze bore into Austin's.
"What about you? Do you believe?"
The question smacked Austin in the face. I don't know," he said after a moment, admitting his true feelings. Father Ambrose's eyebrows raised questioningly.
"Why not? You've seen more than just about anybody else. What more would you need?"
An unsettling tightness gripped Austin's chest. He'd had 40 days in a cell to think about the answer to this question, yet it eluded him still. "I'm not sure."
"That's my point."
Father Ambrose leaned back, rubbing at the bags under his eyes.
"It's rarely about the evidence. There's more at stake."
"Like what?"
"The central delusion."
Austin's brow furrowed. He didn't recognize the concept. "What's that?"
"It's the delusional belief we are all the centers of the universe, each one of us a god, worthy of all praise and all thanksgiving. The power to decide right and wrong, our domain."
Father Ambrose gazed into the distance, as if confronting some long-fought adversary. Austin, however, was just more confused. I don't think I'm a god." Blinking his focus back to the present, Father Ambrose met Austin's eyes.
"Perhaps," he said,
letting the word linger.
"But here's the thing. The second you think that God is Lord, that he became man and died for our sins, so that we may have everlasting life, when you truly believe that insane proposition, it changes everything, right down to the foundation of who you are. That's when the central delusion disappears."
Father Ambrose pulled another saltine from the package and took another bite.
"In my experience, people will move heaven and earth, go to any length to preserve the central delusion. Evidence to the contrary be damned."
"That's strange," Austin said, as Father Ambrose sat there chewing.
"What is?"
"You're a bit old to realize just now that not everyone believes in God." Father Ambrose burst out in laughter, spraying a few pieces of saltine on the table.
"Touché, Austin,"
he said after composing himself.
"It's not exactly a new revelation. I suppose I just allowed myself to think this time it would be different.
Austin grabbed a saltine of his own and took a bite. If I'm being honest, Father, there's one thing that's hard for me to understand.
What's that?
If the Pilgrims saw Jesus rise from the dead and believe he was God, why bother traveling across the galaxy to come here?
That's easy. They came for the Eucharist, the source and summit of the Christian life.
Not sure if he was thinking of the right thing, Austin paused. Finally, he said, "You mean the cracker Catholics eat at church?" Father Ambrose's expression fell, and Austin immediately felt bad. "I'm sorry, Father, I didn't mean to—"
No, it's all right. I realize you don't know any better.
Father Ambrose took another saltine from the sleeve and held it in his hand.
Can I ask you a question, Austin?
Of course, Father.
When you were 10, were you still you?
Sitting back, Austin scrunched up his face. Is this a trick question?
It's a sincere one, I promise.
Austin thought about it to see if there was something he was missing, but nothing came to mind. Yes.
How about when you were 1?
Austin shifted on the bench. Yeah, I guess I was still me.
How can that be so? According to the latest research, at your age, you've probably replaced all the cells in your body 3 or 4 times. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to think there had been 3 or 4 Austins?
That just seems weird.
Exactly. That's because you understand intuitively there is something deeper going on than just the cells of your body. That there is an essential you. A you that persists over time even as the various parts are replaced.
Austin pondered the explanation for a second. Like a classic car that gets fixed over time? Or the ship of Theseus?
Precisely. And we could call the you that persists over time something like your essence, or to use Aristotelian terminology, your substance. Your substance isn't something I could see under a microscope. It isn't a thing I can measure. But just as you are the same you now as when you were then, it is something that's as real as this table.
Austin digested the explanation as Father Ambrose lifted the saltine he'd taken out of the sleeve.
So during Mass, when I pick up the host and say, "This is my body, which will be given up for you," echoing Jesus' words from the Last Supper, the substance of the host changes from simple bread to God, the creator and sustainer of the whole universe.
But it looks the same, Austin said. Then, raising an eyebrow, he quipped, "And I assume it tastes the same."
Yes, but you look different now than when you were 10, and yet you were still you. Substances aren't something we can see just from a thing's external appearance.
Austin shifted again as he thought it through. What does this have to do with the Pilgrims coming here? Couldn't they just say the magic words on their own planet?
It's not a spell, Austin. The only reason I can change the substance of the host during the sacrament of the Mass is because I was given that power by a bishop at my ordination, who was given that power by another bishop at their ordination, and so on all the way back to the apostles themselves, who were given that power by Jesus at Pentecost. This chain all the way back in time is something we call the apostolic succession.
The pieces were beginning to click into place in Austin's mind. So if the Pilgrims want the Eucharist, they need a priest like you, part of the succession. That's the only way to get it.
Yes,
Father Ambrose replied. Austin rubbed his chin. What about the Pilgrims? Can they become priests? Father Ambrose shook his head.
The apostles were all human. For reasons we'll never know, that's how Jesus, God himself, organized things. It's not within the Church's power to change it.
So, the Pilgrims need us. Taking off his glasses, Father Ambrose looked Austin in the eyes.
Very much so.
The gravity of what Father Ambrose was saying dawned on him and Austin leaned back in shock. If what you say is true, that means the Pilgrims will never leave. Father Ambrose's expression became dour.
Yes.
Austin thought about the fissures already spreading through the base. The Pilgrims had arrived just over 6 weeks ago. What would the world look like in a year? In 10? Can we handle that?
I don't know,
Father Ambrose said, looking to some unseen worry beyond Austin.
You saw how Virgil's head changed color yesterday when the black shirts wanted to arrest me. He looked like he was ready to fight. The Pilgrims don't realize I would do anything to avoid violence. They might be pious, but they're still aliens. No matter how advanced they are, I fear a grave miscalculation is inevitable.
Father Ambrose was starting to sound a lot more like General Ferguson.
Meanwhile, humanity is as disunited as ever. You would think at a time like this, at least the Christians would come together. But the Protestants are upset that the Pilgrims are Catholic, and our Orthodox brothers are upset the Pilgrims want to be in full communion with Rome. Even as our churches are filling with people once again, many of the newcomers just want to know about the Pilgrims. They treat Sunday Mass like some sci-fi convention, making a mockery of the whole thing.
Father Ambrose glanced down at the floor, his expression growing gloomier.
And the Middle East, Austin. I pray for the Middle East.
Why would the Middle East be affected?
The Pilgrims' arrival has upset our Muslim brothers. They don't appreciate alien crafts broadcasting the Lord's Prayer over their holy places, shoving what they perceive as apostasy right in their faces.
He'd been so disconnected from the world he hadn't seen it fraying like Father Ambrose had. He didn't know what to say to make it better.
We must trust in God's providence, Austin, especially when it's hard. I just thought I'd be able to pray over this in my observatory, surrounded by my meteorites. Somewhere familiar where I could firm up my spiritual strength.
Father Ambrose stretched out his arm, gesturing toward the drab interior of the trailer.
But it seems that the Lord has other plans for me.
Father Ambrose's mouth tried to curl up into a smile, but failed. This place was crushing him, and it broke Austin's heart to see it. As much as he wanted Father Ambrose nearby, he knew what he had to do. Use the one piece of leverage he had with General Ferguson to set Father Ambrose free. Father, what if there was a way? The trailer door burst open, and an enormous black shirt appeared in the threshold, the balaclava off his face. He beheld Austin with an icy stare, one made all the more sinister by the giant scar slicing across his face. Chapter 24. In the month and a half since Austin had been locked away, Sarge had found religion. Yet he looked no less scary, the deep scar on his face giving him an air of always brewing menace. He'd burst into the trailer in a frenzy, but as it turned out, Sarge wasn't there for him. He was there for Father Ambrose. Having just learned there was a priest on the base, he was desperate to give his confession. That was just fine with Austin. He had to see General Ferguson anyway. Contrary to their first meeting, Sarge had been kind enough to direct Austin to the Rock Creek Park offices where General Ferguson had set up his personal headquarters. It took a bit of searching, but he finally found them. A series of low-slung buildings built in the utilitarian style of the National Park Service located west of where Father Ambrose was being kept. He made his way to the largest of the buildings and went inside, walking down a hall until he found a large room laid out like mission control. Austin took it in. 6 rows of computers faced a wall covered in screens, with one especially large one in the center. On the opposite end of the room, the wall was covered from floor to ceiling by a mirror, the outline of a small door visible in the glass. The room was eerily silent, the 24 regulars staring at their computer screens, not making a sound. It was as if they were mannequins. Not even the hum of breath disrupted the air. Most of the screens displayed live feeds of the Pilgrim crafts over various cities. He recognized the craft over Paris right away, the Eiffel Tower a dead giveaway. He also quickly identified the craft over Washington, D.C. There were other cities on the screens, Beijing, Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, Jerusalem, but it was the central monitor that caught Austin's attention. It depicted smoke billowing from a city skyline, black plumes curling around the minarets of a giant mosque. The feed had a chyron at the bottom that said Medina, and the 3 smaller screens to the right showed images of men rioting. A stern-looking major approached him. "What's happening?" Austin asked, hushing his voice as if in a library. "Shh!" The major grabbed hold of Austin's arm and dragged him through the door in the mirrored wall.
DeSantis,
General Ferguson said, looking into the command center through what Austin now realized was a 2-way mirror.
glad you could make it for the show.
General Ferguson glanced over at the major, gesturing for him to go. As he did, he closed the door, leaving Austin alone with the general. "I need to talk to you."
Medina has been like that for over 3 hours.
General Ferguson nodded at the central monitor.
It usually takes the police 6 hours to restore order after the aliens' broadcast of the Our Father at noon. But today it's much worse. The Saudi military is divided. King Salman has had so many attempts on his life that he doesn't dare leave his quarters.
General Ferguson waved a hand toward the regulars at the computers.
And here we are, condemned to watch Medina burn as the aliens break our encryption, drive us to silence behind our terminals. Little more than voyeurs in uniform.
Austin beheld the footage, the carnage continuing to grow. "It's about Father Ambrose." General Ferguson faced Austin.
How was your visit?
Austin opened his mouth, but words failed him.
Don't be surprised, DeSantis.
General Ferguson's lips curled.
I know everything that happens on my base.
A queasy feeling churned Austin's stomach. "Why did you arrest him?"
I wanted the robot to see that you hate me, that we're at odds. That way he's less likely to believe we're on the same side.
Austin clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. "Release him," he said, barely able to keep his voice level. A single, cold laugh escaped General Ferguson's lips.
He's more useful to me here, DeSantis. Besides, he's a criminal, just like you.
He isn't a criminal. If you don't let him go, I'll tell Virgil I'm your agent. I'll tell him you made me carry a camera onto the ship and you're setting me up to be an infiltrator. General Ferguson's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in them.
Are you threatening me, DeSantis?
Sweat formed on Austin's back, but he steeled himself and said, I am. General Ferguson moved closer.
You would really tell the robot that you're a spy?
Austin stood tall, even though his heart was racing. If I have to. Stepping even closer, the general leaned in until his mouth was so close Austin could feel the breath on his ear.
What makes you think that isn't exactly what I want you to do?
Austin's skin went cold.
Go ahead and confess.
A feline smile crept across General Ferguson's face.
It will only endear you to the robot further. Dig you in deeper.
Patting him once on the shoulder, the general pulled away, walking to the mirror with his hands clasped behind his back. The Pilgrims didn't just bring a video. They brought all sorts of supporting evidence. Austin tried to sound defiant. They're not faking. They're Christians, and they come in peace.
Peace?
General Ferguson pointed at the central monitor.
Does that look like peace to you?
His eyes followed the general's finger, and Austin saw a building on fire. It certainly didn't look like peace, but he couldn't bring himself to say it.
That's what I thought.
Austin fidgeted. Every shot he took against the general was batted back. He'd been cornered and defeated, and he didn't know what else to do. The major burst into the observation room, breaking their tense silence. "Sir!" the major said, urgency in his voice. "Extension coming down from the craft over Jerusalem!" Without hesitation, General Ferguson charged into the command center, and Austin followed.
Get Jerusalem on the central monitor now. Quiet time is over.
The command center erupted in chatter as the central monitor changed to a live feed of Jerusalem, where Austin could see a cylinder coming down from the craft's underside like a car radio antenna.
Sit rep!
Sir, the extension's expected to touch down in Zurich Garden, an officer yelled from the front of the room. Just outside the southwest corner of the old city. Touchdown expected in 70 seconds.
Where's the IDF? They need to get a cordon over there.
Our military attaché says they need half an hour to set one up.
They don't have that long.
General Ferguson took up a position in the center of the command room.
What assets do we have in the air?
3 Predators with a full optics suite circling at 6,000 feet. 4 hours of uptime remaining.
Do we have any more nearby?
9th Squadron has 2 fueled and ready at Ben Gurion, sir.
Get 'em up.
As General Ferguson issued commands, Austin watched the extension descend all the way to the ground. Sir, NSA is patching through CCTV footage from the Jerusalem Cinema on the western end of the park. It has a line of sight on the touchdown.
On the central monitor, now.
The image switched from the live feed of the Pilgrim craft to a city park where the silver extension was landing. It was not on the ground for more than a few moments before the wall started folding away. The room fell silent as a pilgrim appeared at the threshold, stretching out one of its 3 legs to step out into the park. 8 diplomats followed the alien out and formed a circle around it, their heads glowing a deep crimson, the color contrasting with the pilgrim's ashen skin. Another set of diplomats came out and formed an even wider concentric circle. Once the diplomats were in formation, the whole group walked out of the camera's frame.
Get me a visual on that thing!
General Ferguson yelled through the unease that had filled the room. Sir, we're receiving reports that the alien is heading eastbound on Ma'ala Hashalom Street. NSA is picking up live streams of bystanders recording with their phones.
Get one of them up there, damn it!
The central monitor switched to a man live streaming from his phone camera. He was saying something in Hebrew as the pilgrim and his entourage walked toward him. Unlike the late Michael in Rome, who had looked sickly and needed to be carried back to the extension, this pilgrim walked with vigor, taking large strides over the gridlocked cars. The pilgrim and his retinue came right at the man and then bypassed him in one giant step. As the live streamer pointed his camera upward, Austin caught sight of what was concealed by the tentacle skirt. A beak the color of blood and large enough to bite the door off a delivery van. The diplomats spoke in unison, their deep bass voices like a siren, alerting all those nearby. They're saying, "Please, get out of our way!" Austin shouted into the chaotic command center. General Ferguson gave him a quick nod to let him know he'd heard. The pilgrim continued its march down the street, and Austin could see flashing blue lights, the sight of cops and soldiers trying to clear people out of its path. The live streamer pursued the pilgrim, but he was soon grabbed by an Israeli policeman, and the pilgrim disappeared out of frame.
Goddamn IDF!
General Ferguson screamed.
How soon till they clear the area?
IDF says they're working on it, sir.
Get me another visual. Now!
Sir, we've got a visual from one of our predators. The pilgrim just passed the western wall in the old city. Putting it on the central monitor now. The image cut to an aerial shot of the pilgrim outside a mosque with a golden dome. The image zoomed in, and Austin could see the pilgrim kneeling and making the sign of the cross with its long, bony arm. Sir, IDF is saying the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex has been evacuated and is now secure.
That bastard. Praying at the Dome of the Rock, the 3rd holiest site in Islam. These aliens are just begging for a jihad.
General Ferguson pointed his hand at the screen where a man could be seen running across the plaza toward the pilgrim.
Who's that inbound?
Sir, it looks like a Waqf. Religious police on the Temple Mount. Non-Muslims are not allowed to pray up there.
Where the hell is the IDF? I thought they had this place secure.
As the man got close to the group, one of the diplomats rushed over and tackled him to the ground. The man wriggled in the diplomat's clutches but was seemingly unhurt.
Sir?
A colonel, a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist, approached General Ferguson.
The President has declared DEFCON 1. Field commanders have nuclear authorization.
The colonel opened the briefcase and handed General Ferguson a red laminate card.
Where's POTUS?
COG protocols have been activated. The President is en route to a secure location.
Nuclear authorization? The words hung heavy in Austin's mind. The command center fell silent as every eye fixed on the pilgrim praying on the plaza, possibly the last image they would ever see. Time seemed to stretch as they all waited. Austin wasn't sure whether it took seconds or hours, but when the pilgrim stood up and started walking back in the direction it had come, there was a breeze in the room as everyone exhaled at the same time. Sir, IDF says the alien has a clear path back to the extension. The cordon is secure. General Ferguson handed the red laminate card back to the colonel.
Looks like I won't be needing this today.
The colonel took the card, a restrained smile on his face. Austin felt his heartbeat slow down as the apocalypse was averted. An alarm blared at one of the computer terminals. Sir, short-range rockets inbound from the West Bank! The Palestinians have fired on the Pilgrim craft over Jerusalem! The room fell back into chaos.
Time to impact!
1 minute, sir!
Can the Israelis shoot the rockets down? Where's their damn Iron Dome?
Stand by, sir! Austin's heart resumed its manic pace. There was nothing anyone could do except watch the monitors and hope the Israelis could prevent an interstellar war.
Sir,
the colonel said, still holding the briefcase.
The President has ordered a preemptive strike on the alien mothership. Orbital launch platforms will fire in 5 minutes. All other commanders are instructed to hold back nuclear ordnance for a possible second strike.
China?
Their orbital platform remains on standby, sir. The Politburo is in hiding. We're not sure who's in charge over there now. They won't be assisting in the attack.
General Ferguson nodded stoically. Sir, we have detonations! Little explosions lit up the sky around the Pilgrim craft, bursts of yellow glowing against the smooth silver.
Are those impacts?
General Ferguson demanded. No, sir. Rockets are detonating away from the Pilgrim craft. They were intercepted.
Did the Israelis get them? Was it Iron Dome?
No. The regular informing General Ferguson tilted his head at his monitor. IDF says they couldn't launch in time. General Ferguson furrowed his brow.
Then who intercepted them?
Sir, an officer spoke haltingly from the front of the room. Infrared sensors showed extreme IR radiation emanating from the alien craft in directed beams. It seems the aliens intercepted the rockets. A chilling silence filled the room.
They're armed,
General Ferguson said, dismayed.
Those goddamn alien crafts above major world cities are armed.
Sir, the extension is retracting back into the craft. There are no Pilgrim casualties. The President has ordered the orbital launch sequence aborted. We've been stood back down to DEFCON 3. Nuclear launch authorization withdrawn. A cheer filled up the room. Doomsday averted right before their eyes. When the cheering subsided, General Ferguson turned to face Austin, his narrowed eyes slicing through Austin's relief.
You see, DeSantis,
he said, his voice cutting.
War is coming.
Chapter 25. With a creaking whine, the Humvee pulled up alongside Father Ambrose's trailer. A queue of regulars, dressed in full battle gear, waited patiently outside the trailer in a single file that went all the way out of Austin's field of view. At the head of the line was Sarge, his 6'4" frame perched outside the trailer door like a nightclub bouncer. Austin and the black shirt commander exited the Humvee and approached him.
What is this?
The black shirt commander scowled.
You know what it is, Matthews,
Sarge replied.
He's a prisoner,
Matthews protested.
He can't be offering confession.
A second Humvee pulled up behind the first, and a squad of black shirts emerged. They took up a position behind Matthews.
He's the only cleric on the base.
Sarge folded his tree-trunk arms.
Until General Ferguson rescinds his ban on chaplains at frontline installations, this is the new chaplainry.
All right, enough of this. Matthews made his way toward the trailer door, but Sarge stepped in front of him.
He's busy,
Sarge glowered.
What about that do you not understand?
The black shirts behind Matthews raised their rifles, prompting the regulars to abandon the line and surround the black shirts, their own rifles raised.
What are you doing?
Matthews yelled. Sarge glared back.
I'll see that you Jesus freaks get court-martialed for this! Every single one of you!
What's going on?
Father Ambrose appeared at the trailer's threshold, his voice calm.
You're coming with us.
Matthews said to Father Ambrose as the regulars kept their rifles leveled, their fingers perilously close to the triggers. "Something happened, Father." Austin's voice shook. "You and I need to go see Virgil right now." Realizing they were one sudden move away from a bloodbath, Austin met Father Ambrose's eyes, pleading with him to do something.
"Blessed are the merciful,"
Father Ambrose began, his voice cutting through the air.
"For they will be shown mercy."
A hush fell over the regulars.
"Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God."
Austin peered at the closest regular. His face was softening, but his rifle remained raised.
"Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God."
Father Ambrose's words hung in the air, a stillness coming over the people, one as taut as a piano wire. Austin gazed at the regulars with their raised rifles, too scared to breathe. After a few moments, a regular lowered his rifle, then another, and soon they had all stood down. Father Ambrose made his way toward Austin, but Sarge still stood in front of Matthews, blocking Father Ambrose's way.
"It's okay, John,"
Father Ambrose said to Sarge.
"Tell everyone I'll hear each and every one of their confessions when I'm back, even if I have to go through the night."
Sarge's face went tight for a second, and then he reluctantly stepped aside. Father Ambrose patted him on the shoulder and then got into the first Humvee with Austin, which wasted no time in pulling away. On the way to the cylinder, Austin explained everything that had happened in Jerusalem.
"My goodness. Was anyone hurt?"
Austin smiled amid the gloom. After that entire download of info, all Father Ambrose cared about was the well-being of others. A diplomat tackled a man, but he looks no worse for wear."
Oh, good.
The Humvee navigated through the numerous barricades and then stopped in the middle of the 10th hole fairway. Stepping out of the vehicle, Austin and Father Ambrose made their way toward the cylinder. "Do we just walk in?" Austin asked. Father Ambrose shrugged.
"Worth a shot."
He walked right up to the cylinder, and as he did, the walls unfolded to reveal the dark hallway into Virgil's world. Austin took an anxious glance behind him at the hundreds of nervous troops lining the barricades. He braced himself for what lay ahead. In the Victorian living room, they found Virgil on his knees, his head a deep crimson, his hands clasped in prayer.
"Virgil,"
Father Ambrose said.
"we need to talk."
Virgil remained motionless, the color of his head unchanging. "It's important, Virgil," Austin said. Virgil still didn't move. Austin shot Father Ambrose a frightened look, but instead of returning the look or offering words of reassurance, Father Ambrose went over and tapped Virgil on his dome as though he was knocking on a door.
"Virgil, wake up!"
The staccato thud of Father Ambrose's knuckles on Virgil's skull sent chills down Austin's spine. Just as Father Ambrose raised his fist again to give Virgil his biggest thwap yet, Virgil's head turned pale blue, and he rose to his feet in one graceful motion.
"Father,"
Virgil said, seemingly unperturbed by the knocks.
"it is so wonderful to see you. How are you doing?"
"Not well, Virgil. Do you know about what happened in Jerusalem?"
"Of course, Father."
Virgil glided over to the unlit fireplace.
"Michael is quite pleased. He fulfilled his obligation."
Austin and Father Ambrose looked at each other in confusion. "What obligation?" Austin asked.
"Michael's final wish."
"Which was what, exactly?" Virgil turned his torso to face Austin.
"That Michael would pray for the repose of his soul at the place where our Lord and Savior prayed to his Father."
Frowning, Austin looked at Father Ambrose for clarification.
The Temple Mount is where the Jewish temple was located during Jesus' time. It was the center of all Judaism, the dwelling place of God. Jesus spent a lot of time there."
Austin scrunched his nose. "Let me get this straight. Michael just risked everything. Injury to himself, war, the fate of humanity, just to say a prayer?" A blue flame erupted from the fireplace floor, the fire tight and compact, like a blowtorch.
Pilgrims take final wishes very seriously, Austin. They are a critical part of the social order. Michael is firm but true of heart. He will stop at nothing to honor the dying requests made of him.
Before Austin could open his mouth and dress Virgil down, Father Ambrose jumped in.
The Temple Mount is the third holiest site in Islam, where Muhammad purportedly ascended into heaven.
Father Ambrose's voice was mild, like a patient teacher.
Michael needs to understand these human considerations before he acts.
Virgil grabbed a dried-out log from next to the fireplace and carefully placed it into the center of the blue flame, the inferno engulfing his hand.
Father, the Church considers Muhammad to be a false prophet, does it not?
Virgil held his hand steady in the flame.
Yes, but...
Then why would God permit a false prophet to ascend into heaven?
He wouldn't, Virgil, but that's not the point. There are sensitivities that need to be taken into consideration.
All Michael did was pray.
The blue flame disappeared, leaving only the burning log in Virgil's hand, which began casting an orange glow.
Spreading the gospel by his example.
We need to be careful how we spread the gospel, Virgil.
Careful, Father.
Virgil placed the burning log onto the fireplace grate.
Didn't our Lord say, "Go ye into the whole world and preach the gospel to every creature"?
Yes, but it also says in the first letter of St. Peter that we are called to spread our faith with gentleness and reverence.
Does it not also say in 1 Peter that when you are maligned, those who defame your good conduct in Christ may themselves be put to shame, Father?
Virgil's hand was glowing red, like steel fresh from the forge.
Michael offered his prayer in love and gentleness, but his prayer was met with violence. Isn't it those that opposed him who are shamed by their behavior?
Enough! Austin snapped. There could have been a war. The U.S. was minutes, maybe seconds, from firing its nukes.
Yes, we detected that. It was very strange. The attack was initiated and then called off.
They called it off because you managed to blow up those rockets with your lasers. 30 more seconds
Not lasers, Austin. Microwave beams.
Don't you get it? It doesn't matter what kind of beam it was. What matters is that we all could have died. And unlike a machine like you, humans can't upload their minds to the cloud. When we die, that's it. We're gone forever. Virgil stood straight up, his hand still the color of flame.
I know death, Austin.
Virgil spoke deliberately, his tone somber.
And I fear it as much as any human.
Austin felt a pang of remorse. Virgil dying was the last thing he wanted to see.
Let's all take a deep breath,
Father Ambrose said. He looked back and forth between Austin and Virgil.
Virgil, you do whatever it is you do to relax.
I pray, Father.
The priest smiled.
That's a good start. We all want the same thing. Harmony between the pilgrims and humans. Isn't that right?
Of course, Father. Humans, like pilgrims, are created in the image of God. We want nothing more than peace with our brothers and sisters in Christ.
That's good, Virgil.
Father Ambrose nodded approvingly.
Let's discuss what we can do to prevent any further misunderstandings.
Like what, Father?
Pull the craft over Medina back up into space, Austin said, trying to sound level-headed, though he knew his irritation was leaking through. The one over Jerusalem, too.
But, Austin...
Virgil took a step forward from the fireplace toward the two of them.
We are called to spread the gospel to all of creation.
You said that already. Father Ambrose put his hand up to quiet Austin.
We know, Virgil, but perhaps for the sake of comity, it would be best, at least for the time being.
It does not seem wise to sacrifice eternal salvation at the altar of comedy, Father. It seems more important that the inhabitants below our craft hear the good news.
Virgil, you must understand.
If you keep this up, they'll attack again. Is that what you want?
Of course not, Austin.
But if they do, then what?
Then we will defend ourselves, just as we did in Jerusalem.
Austin could feel his cheeks flush. And if people die?
No one died in Jerusalem.
With a huff of exasperation, Austin looked over to Father Ambrose.
Virgil.
Father Ambrose took a deep breath and stroked his beard, trying to recenter the conversation.
How can we convince the pilgrims to pull those crafts back, that prudence dictates you take a gentler approach to your evangelization?
Virgil's glowing hand had faded back to its original silver color.
There is one way, Father.
What is it?
If His Holiness Pope Stephen were to make clear that our crafts over Jerusalem and Medina are not spreading the gospel with the gentleness and reverence that St. Peter himself commanded, then we would have no choice but to remove them.
Out of respect for the magisterium?
Yes, Father.
Austin,
Father Ambrose said, his tone threaded with urgency.
We've got to get a message to Rome before it's too late.
Chapter 26. Excusing themselves from Virgil's presence, Austin and Father Ambrose hurried down the dark hallway. When they reached the outside world, they saw 2 Humvees idling on the 10th hole fairway, the blackshirts who had brought them there still waiting. Austin bounded over to the closest Humvee, addressing the nearest blackshirt. "We've got vital information for General Ferguson. You've got to take us to him now." The blackshirt's eyes narrowed.
"The prisoner comes with us."
Austin turned to find 3 blackshirts surrounding Father Ambrose. "We don't have time for this!"
"General's orders,"
the blackshirt insisted.
"Now back up."
Austin held his ground.
"Back up now?"
the blackshirt growled.
"Or I'll have you in a cell so fast your head will spin."
Father Ambrose's calm presence did little to ease the tension.
It's all right.
The voice cut through the standoff. Austin turned to see 2 green eyes approaching, the most beautiful blackshirt he'd ever seen, filling up his view.
What's going on?
"Father Ambrose and I need to see General Ferguson." Austin's hands loosened, his tone instantly calm. "It's urgent." She turned toward the blackshirt that Austin had nearly gotten in a fight with.
What do you say, Miller?
"Can't do it. I've got direct orders to bring the priest back to his trailer."
The blackshirt stroked her balaclava-covered chin as her green eyes looked upward. She was thinking, puzzling out her next move, and Austin wished he could watch her think like that all day.
I'll take you to the general myself,
she said to Austin.
You can speak to him and get this all sorted. Does that work?
Austin looked at Father Ambrose, who nodded.
Go. Convince General Ferguson to put me in touch with Cardinal Benedetto. It's the only way.
Austin nodded a goodbye to Father Ambrose and jumped into the Humvee. The female blackshirt followed him into the back seat.
Claire, by the way,
she said, as the Humvee started driving. Claire. Her name echoed in his mind. It was beauty itself, the sound of it made more perfect by her sweet Mississippi twang. Austin, he sheepishly replied.
I know. There aren't actually a lot of people around the base or, the planet who have met aliens.
Even with the balaclava on, he could tell that she was smiling. It took them a few minutes to clear all the checkpoints, the fortifications around the cylinder still growing by the day. When they finally exited, they took a hard right onto Military Road and began traveling at speed. They had just crossed the bridge over Rock Creek when they began to slow. Austin leaned over, trying to see through the front windshield. They were nowhere near General Ferguson's headquarters. 50 yards ahead, parked lengthwise across Military Road, a JLTV was blocking their path, and a regular gestured for them to stop. Another regular manned the 50 cal on the JLTV, and 2 others sat atop parked ATVs. The Humvee stopped, and Claire opened the rear passenger door as the regular approached.
Can you move that thing?
The regular came right up to her, eyeing everyone in the vehicle.
Sorry, road's closed.
Closed? We're heading to General Ferguson's HQ on an urgent matter. Just let us scoot by.
No can do,
the regular said, glancing nervously down the road behind them.
On whose orders?
Captain,
The regular paused, like he was thinking.
O'Malley,
he finally said. Claire shot Austin a skeptical look, her green eyes meeting his. Even Austin could tell something was wrong.
Where's the captain?
Claire got out of the Humvee, leaving the door open behind her.
I want to speak with him.
He's in the can,
the regular said, shifting uncomfortably.
The can? Why don't one of those 2 privates on ATVs go get him?
I'm sorry, ma'am,
the regular replied, defiant now.
They can't.
Austin's heart began to race. This wasn't right.
Why not?
Austin watched Claire's hand travel down to her rifle grip. Her question lingered, unanswered, as a siren filled the air. She spun around, her green eyes going wide. Austin twisted to peer through the rear windshield of the Humvee. Behind them, a crowd of people was marching down Military Road, banners in their hands and crosses held aloft, thousands of them, the throng stretching so far back he couldn't see the end of it. They were chanting something, but Austin couldn't tell what.
My God, you let the civvies in?
This is bigger than the army. These people deserve a chance to have their questions answered.
Claire got in the regular's face.
You and your unit, take up defensive positions now. We need to stop them. That's an order.
It doesn't have to go like that. I'm praying it doesn't. Just put your guns down.
The crowd was getting bigger, closing in on their position. Soon they would be surrounding the Humvee. Austin shifted uneasily at the thought.
We took an oath,
Claire said with a frown.
Doesn't that mean anything to you?
Sorry, ma'am,
the regular said, motionless.
The time of you black shirts telling us what to do is over.
For a moment, they all lived in that eternal nothing, Claire and the regular, each with a hand on their guns. Her gaze shifted briefly to Austin, taking him in with her eyes. Before he could plead with her to just lay down her gun, she raised hers up and opened fire. There was a flash, the whiteness of the muzzle blast drowning out everything in the world. When he could see again, the regular was falling over, a giant hole in the side of his neck. But Claire was falling too, her helmet split, the regular having got off a return volley before the darkness took him.
Claire!
Austin screamed as her body slumped to the ground. The motor roared to life, the tires screeching as the Humvee sped away. The driver jerked the wheel to the right, accelerating onto the off-ramp to Ross Drive. Lead rained on them from the roadblock, the rear windshield's ballistic glass splintering into a spiderweb. Austin was too shocked to duck, the image of Claire getting shot playing repeatedly in his head. The drumbeat of the 50 cal brought him back from his trance. More rounds collided with the grass around them, chunks of earth spraying into the air. They were milliseconds from the safety of the underpass out of their killer's line of sight. But it was a few milliseconds too many, the massive rounds of the 50 cal crashing into the doors and roof of the Humvee with a diabolical crack. Austin closed his eyes, bracing for the pain of death. No pain came. When he opened his eyes again, he saw the sky, the 50 cal having punched several holes in the roof.
Donnie!
The driver yelled as black smoke poured from a giant hole in the hood. The black shirt riding shotgun was dead, the anterior part of his head no longer attached.
Donnie!
The driver kept yelling as he sped south down Ross Drive, swerving close to the oak trees on either side of the narrow road. Austin opened his mouth to tell the driver to focus when day suddenly turned to night, and a deafening wail, far louder than the bass siren, filled up the darkness. They didn't careen for long in the blackness before their motion was interrupted by an unseen object. Austin slammed into the door as the Humvee flipped onto its side. The vehicle scraped along Ross Drive on its driver's side, sparks spraying, only coming to a stop when it slammed into an oak tree. When Austin came to, the sky had turned bright again. Donnie was on top of him, his corpse spilling warm blood onto Austin's shoulders. The scent of leaking diesel fouled the air. The driver was already trying to climb out of the passenger side door. Austin moved his legs, testing that they still worked. A sharp pain spiked through his whole body, originating from his left foot. He grabbed his ankle, half expecting to feel an exposed bone, but felt only his boot.
Let's go!
The black shirt driver yelled, opening the rear passenger door from atop the Humvee. Putting his weight on his right foot, Austin threw Donnie's body off him and somehow managed to pull himself out of the smoldering Humvee. The black shirt had already taken a defensive position behind the overturned vehicle. Austin followed where his rifle was pointed. The two regulars on ATVs had given chase.
I'll hold them off,
the black shirt said, taking a shot.
Now go!
Austin sat atop the Humvee, frozen, Claire's perfect face still in his mind. Why had that happened? What was going on? A round hit the back of the Humvee, narrowly missing Austin and snapping him back to attention. He hurriedly lowered himself down and limped into the woods. As the sound of gunfire raged behind him, he moved as fast as he could manage, ducking into a thicket of ponderosa pines, changing direction to confuse any pursuers. When he couldn't hear the gunshots anymore, he made his way up a ridge, using tree branches to help him ascend, the pain in his ankle searing. When he got to the top, a faint roar reached his ears. Looking up, he saw 3 helicopters flying in a V formation, miniguns firing onto some unseen target below. The sky went black again, a horn blaring so loud he thought he would puke. His hands went to his ears, but the sound disoriented him. He collapsed, and by the time the horn stopped, Austin was rolling down the ridge, desperately grabbing at dead leaves and tree branches in an effort to slow his descent. He came to a stop as light returned, cuts and scrapes all over his body, everything bathed in a dull red glow. Above him, the Pilgrim craft pulsated red, like Virgil's hand when he'd taken it from the fire, bathing the whole park in a fiery aura. He saw the extension was gone, the physical connection with Earth severed. Knowing he had to get to General Ferguson's HQ at the park offices, he raced down the hill, trying not to pass out from the pain. He'd already taken too long. After a while, though, the pain became too much and he plunked himself down onto a fallen log.
Honey, it's me.
The voice tiptoed through the forest, just loud enough to be heard over Austin's panting breaths.
Are the girls safe?
He went toward it, hoping it was a black shirt with a vehicle, someone who could help him get to the general.
Wait, what?
As he got nearer, he saw a woman regular leaning on a tree, a phone pressed to her ear and a rifle propped against a rock 8 yards away.
My God, who would do that?
She didn't turn as Austin got closer, seemingly too engrossed to notice the sound of the rustling leaves.
I don't know what happens now, Scott. Put Katie on.
Austin was close enough to see her service patches. A lieutenant. U.S. Army, 22nd Mechanized Battalion, her dark hair oddly familiar. Before he could convince himself not to, he reached out and tapped the lieutenant on the shoulder. She twisted around in shock, her eyes turning cold when she saw him. Austin recognized her instantly.
Who are you?
She screeched, the phone still pressed to her ear. Austin was too overwhelmed to reply. Her face had been seared into his mind. The memory of the old man's broken skin, the crack of the whip. It all came flooding back.
No, not you, honey.
Lieutenant Wu said into the phone, her eyes still locked on Austin. He searched her face to see if there was any recognition, but he saw none.
Mommy has to go now. Oh, don't cry, hon. I love you,
she said, putting the phone away. A phone? Austin hit every syllable with disgust.
I don't know how you made it this far into the base.
Lieutenant Wu took a step back, her face nervously scanning Austin's civilian attire.
But if you let me turn you in, I can see that you aren't charged for coming through the park barricade.
Austin stepped to the side, conspicuously standing between the lieutenant and her gun. She was defenseless now, exposed. You don't remember me, do you? He said menacingly. She tilted her head, terrified.
I can't seem
What
to...
is the first assumption of alien capability? Her eyebrows slammed together in confusion. Can't remember?
Cyber dominance,
she meekly replied. Austin nodded. A phone like that is enough to get you 20 lashes at a militia muster. I wonder what it would get you at a frontline installation. He recalled how he had longed for her to know what it was like to feel powerless after what she'd done to the kind old man. But as she looked at him, a small wrinkle in her brow, he realized she still couldn't place who he was. There were too many old backs to choose from, too many poor saps ripped red for the sin of a cell phone.
My youngest has Down syndrome. She doesn't understand why Mommy can't call her.
Austin laughed bitterly. I'll be sure to tell General Ferguson that when I see him. I'm on my way now. To Austin's surprise, her face didn't contort in fear. It merely fell.
I doubt he's here. Probably on his way to some bunker by now.
Austin eyed her suspiciously. Nice try. She shook her head.
It doesn't matter anyway. Rome's gone. Nuked. It won't be long before the Pilgrims attack.
Her words froze him. Austin searched her face, desperately looking for any sign of deceit. What are you talking about?
A nuke went off near the Vatican. The whole thing is gone. So is the Pilgrim craft above the city. All of it vaporized.
Austin's breaths became labored. He was already too late. War was here. And Claire was dead. Poor, sweet Claire. You're lying. Tears welled up in his eyes. The Pilgrims would never.
It wasn't the Pilgrims. It was us.
Chapter 27. It was dark when Austin reached Father Ambrose's trailer. After he'd learned that Rome was gone, no cardinal to send a message to, no pope or Vatican either, he'd changed course. In its place was nuclear destruction. Thousands of Romans dead in an instant, many thousands more soon to meet their doom as fires raged and fallout rained down. There'd be no peace between humans and pilgrims now. Not after the place the Pilgrims had journeyed so long to get to, and the man they'd crawled across the galaxy to see, had been destroyed by man's savagery, a transgression that Austin figured they simply would not let stand. Austin was certain the Pilgrims' vengeance would be swift, the stain of humanity rectified for good. That was why he decided to head to Father Ambrose's trailer, to wait out the end of the world with the closest thing he had to a friend. The problem was that Father Ambrose's trailer was overrun, hemmed in by hundreds of regulars, each one with a white armband on, all eager to have their confession heard before the very end. Sarge stood at the front of the line like a sequoia, immense and immovable, the only thing between Father Ambrose and a stampede. From the back of the crowd, Austin tried to peer through the mass of bodies, but a tall medic praying the rosary blocked his view. He was about to give up and walk away when the trailer door opened and a soldier who looked too young to shave walked out with Father Ambrose close behind. Austin readied himself to shout at the priest, but as he watched Father Ambrose negotiate the steps of the trailer, he saw the movements of a man who had aged decades in a few hours, and decided to stay silent. He didn't want to burden his friend any further. As Austin turned to leave, though, their eyes met across the crowd. Gazes held. Their silent exchange conveyed paragraphs. Father Ambrose's face turned apologetic, as though he felt he should be tending to Austin but couldn't. Austin shook his head, releasing the man, letting him know he'd done enough for him, that there were others who needed him more. With a nod, the priest called in the next penitent, taking them into the trailer and out of view. Austin hobbled away from the crowd as a convoy of black MRAPs rolled by. He hadn't gone far when a dark silhouette emerged from the shadows, its skeletal form creeping toward him between the streetlights. Austin's eyes darted around him, looking for an escape if he needed one, when General Ferguson's voice cut through the night.
There you are.
Austin's muscles tensed. You're still here? General Ferguson walked into the light.
Of course, DeSantis. Where else would I be?
I don't know. In a bunker somewhere with the rest of the brass, awaiting the onslaught?
I don't run, DeSantis.
The general's face was uncharacteristically flat, no feline smile to underline his bravado.
I'd like to show you something.
He waved his hand, and a Humvee down the road turned on its headlights and drove over. Opening the rear door, he gestured for Austin to get in. Austin hesitated, his mind involuntarily flashing back to Claire and her green eyes.
Your driver survived and made it to my HQ. I know what happened, but you're safe now.
The regular killed her. Why would he do that? She was... Austin stopped himself, afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold back the tears.
Did you see the protesters gathered outside the base on your helicopter ride in?
Yes.
Regular units sympathetic to the protesters let them in. As black shirts and loyal regulars went to repel the crowd, Sympathetic regulars opened up on them.
General Ferguson shook his head.
It was a bloodbath. A close combat melee where you couldn't tell friend from foe. They nearly overran the cylinder defenses, but they held. Just.
A jet flew by overhead, the night sky lighting up as its ordnance hit its target on the far side of the park.
We've nearly restored order now.
The general pointed at a passing black MRAP.
I brought in the 302nd Military Police Brigade to handle base security, and I've ordered all regular units to stand down and leave the base. I trained these black shirts myself, DeSantis. There won't be any more surprises.
Gesturing toward the waiting Humvee, the general said,
It's time we get going.
Too exhausted to argue, Austin staggered into the Humvee, the pain in his ankle sharper than ever.
It's a sprain,
General Ferguson said, taking a seat next to Austin.
If it was broken, you wouldn't have been able to walk as far as you did.
What are you going to show me?
The extension is back down.
General Ferguson looked forward, every battle-scarred year on his face visible in the moonlight.
It descended about an hour ago.
Is that where we're going?
Not yet.
General Ferguson turned and looked Austin in the eye.
There's something you have to see first.
The command center was silent, a palpable heaviness in the air. The sergeant at the nearest terminal to Austin looked drained, his eyes so bloodshot little white could be seen. On the large central monitor was a map of Saudi Arabia. The bottom half of the country was almost entirely colored red. The other monitors rotated between CCTV footage and videos from the internet. In every one of them, people were running away in a panic, pursued by small objects Austin could barely make out. A colonel pushed past Austin and ran up to General Ferguson, brandishing a handful of notes and eagerly miming for the general to follow him to the observation room. The general, however, stayed exactly where he was.
I'm declaring OPSEC level Delta. There's no point in silence. The aliens already know we're watching them. Anyone here who needs a break is relieved. You've served your country with honor today, boys.
2 lieutenants got up from their terminals, saluted the general, and exited the room. The colonel, still holding the notes, launched into his report.
Sir, the Saudi ICBM salvo has completed its orbit and is about to initiate its final burn on the way to the target.
Noted. And the swarm?
The main one is about to engulf the northeastern suburbs of Riyadh, sir.
As the general was debriefed, Austin turned his attention to a monitor displaying what seemed like an airport terminal filled with bodies. In the center of the image was a woman in traditional Saudi garb, a long black gown, holding a child by the hand. They were both face down on the floor. Nearby, a check-in agent was slumped over his computer like a discarded doll. The image was so still that Austin knew it was video only because of the digital clock that ticked way above the check-in counter, keeping perfect time down to the second of all of the life these people would never see. "This is it?" Austin asked, horrified as realization set in. "The Pilgrim attack has begun." General Ferguson's focus stayed on the monitors, and Austin followed his gaze to the map. He realized that the red was the death zone, the tan the places not yet attacked. It wouldn't be long before the whole of Saudi Arabia would be covered in red.
Sir, the Saudi ICBM salvo has completed its final burn. Time to target 10 hours and 41 minutes.
CCTV footage to the right of the central monitor caught Austin's attention. It showed an intersection transformed into chaos. Cars had smashed into one another, some on fire. In each one, there was a driver slumped over their steering wheel. "How long until the attack gets here?" General Ferguson turned to face Austin.
"They're not coming here, DeSantis."
Austin searched General Ferguson's face, trying to tell if he was being defiant. "What do you mean?"
"The alien attack is limited to Saudi Arabia."
Saudi Arabia?
2 hours, DeSantis. That's all it took. 2 hours for the CIA and MI6 to both independently confirm that the attack on the Vatican was carried out by Prince Khalid, 18th in line for the Saudi throne, in retaliation for the alien praying at the Temple Mount. The prince smuggled a 1-megaton nuclear device out of the Saudi arsenal and delivered it to Vatican City by sailing it up the Tiber River on his yacht. This was not a sanctioned attack. He acted alone.
General Ferguson's face contorted in a grimace.
That information was to be treated as eyes only. Total digital embargo. Transmission of reports by paper and hand delivery. No exceptions.
The general shook his head.
Unfortunately, at 0511 UTC, the Italian ambassador to the UN, who'd earlier been briefed on these findings, broke the digital embargo by texting the substance of the intelligence assessment to his mistress in Bologna.
Picking up a laser pointer, he flashed it on the map of Saudi Arabia.
The attack began at 0512 UTC when the aliens plunged Mecca in darkness, blotting out all light in the city, both natural and artificial. Shortly thereafter, small, four-legged robots were seen emerging from the alien craft over Medina, falling to the ground and killing people on contact. Corporal, can you pull that up on a monitor, please?
A video of the Pilgrim craft over Medina appeared on the screen. Small objects rained down from it like a silver hailstorm. The video then paused and zoomed in on one. It was a little machine with 4 legs and a tear-shaped body, the same machine that had grated Austin's Parmigiano Reggiano back in the Victorian living room.
At 0532 UTC, additional landings were detected 30 kilometers southwest of Riyadh and 25 kilometers south of Ad Dammam. The swarms rapidly spread out in all directions, making contact with most Saudi major metros within 30 minutes. At the current rate, we expect that every square inch of the country will be infested with these killer machines in the next 88 minutes.
Austin's breath escaped him as he thought of all the needless death. How do you know they aren't coming here?
Captain Hammond,
General Ferguson said to one of the black shirts behind a computer terminal.
Pull up the hospital footage.
The central monitor changed from the map to security footage of a hospital nursery. From where the camera was placed, they could see the entire area. The entrance had been shattered, and a baby was lying on the floor just before its threshold. It was wiggling on top of some bed linens as 4 little machines clung to the doorframe like bugs stopped by an invisible fence. On the far side of the room was a priest holding an infant next to a running faucet. A doctor was pushing another bassinet toward the priest while about a half-dozen school-age children huddled in the opposite corner.
Captain, do we have audio?
Yes, sir.
Put it on.
But, sir.
I know, son. But we have to.
The captain complied, and the command center was filled with the voice of the priest speaking Italian, the sound coming from a set of speakers set up in the front of the room. Austin's heart raced. What is this?
This is security footage the NSA obtained from King Fahad Medical City Hospital in Riyadh.
What's going on?
Keep watching.
The priest placed the head of the newborn underneath the running water 3 times as he continued to speak in Italian before putting the child into the bassinet next to him and taking another baby. Austin realized the priest was performing a baptism.
We were able to identify the priest. His name is Monsignor Vincenzo Innocenti. He was the chaplain assigned to the Italian embassy in Riyadh. We're still not sure how he made it from the embassy across town to the hospital amid the carnage.
The priest and the doctor began to wrestle, the doctor suddenly realizing that the priest was baptizing the children. As the doctor held the priest, the school-aged children descended upon him, attempting to rip a baby he was trying to baptize from his arms. After a short struggle, a small girl ended up with the baby.
We don't have much time. The diplomats will be here soon.
Monsignor Innocenti was right. Within moments, a diplomat was standing in the nursery doorway, its arrival marked by the children's shrieks, their horrified voices echoing through the command center. No. Austin's head became light. Please, no. Austin winced as the diplomat went for the infant lying on the sheets. But to his surprise, the diplomat picked it up gently, cradling the baby's head. But as soon as the diplomat stepped away, the little machines behind it pounced, charging into the nursery with a ferocious speed. It took only seconds for a machine to find its way to one of the children. The little girl vainly tried to push it off with her small hands, but to no avail. Soon, she was limp on the ground, her eyes wide open. Austin's heart slammed against the walls of his chest as he watched. He distrusted his own eyes. The Pilgrims couldn't really be capable of such evil. Permission to be relieved, sir. A black shirt from behind a computer terminal said between tears, as the sound of children screaming filled the command center.
Granted,
General Ferguson replied. Austin watched as the doctor and the children were killed one by one. The priest made a futile attempt to shield a young child with his body, but the boy went limp, the whole exercise in vain. This can't be happening. Austin's voice was so broken it was unrecognizable to himself.
It is happening, DeSantis.
Austin noticed that the infant by the door, the infant the priest had baptized, and the priest himself were being spared. The machines. They're only killing Muslims?
Yes. The machine swarm stopped at the Yemeni border and is avoiding migrant workers. That tells us that the killing is selective, the genocide limited to Arabia. Only people of Saudi nationality and Islamic faith.
But how?
Cyber dominance, DeSantis. In addition to the humans they directly witness being baptized like these infants, the aliens likely have a file on every living human, updated every second. They know who's a baptized Christian and who isn't. There's no collateral damage. Every kill desired.
Austin felt so queasy he thought he would pass out. As revenge for the Vatican, the Pilgrims weren't throwing a nuclear tantrum, destroying cities in emotional fits like a drunkard breaking plates. They were attacking with a scalpel, deciding who lived and who died down to the very man. Austin looked up as the sound of sobs filled the command center. A little girl with a baby in her arms knelt on the ground in front of the diplomat, the last two unbaptized survivors. She knelt there almost as if she was begging the diplomat for mercy. But the little machines did not stop. They only made their way to her more slowly, as if they knew the need for rushing was done. "No, please," Austin said, his voice trembling. "Not her, please." The priest rushed toward her, trying to intervene, but the machines struck too soon. When she fell backward, her eyes wide open, her dead stare looking directly into the security camera lens.
The aliens have revealed their true colors, DeSantis. Now you can see why I am the way I am.
The world became hazy. The dead eyes of the girl all Austin could see. He reached out, trying to steady himself, but his legs felt like jelly. He thought he saw the priest take the baby from the girl and run off in the direction of the sink, but he couldn't be sure. The darkness overcame him, his body going to meet the ground. As he passed out, the girl's face was still with him, her dead eyes, her sweet visage, like a tattoo on his mind, haunting him as his consciousness faded, tormenting him as Arabia burned. Chapter 28.
DeSantis, wake up.
Light dripped into Austin's eyes, his head shooting with pain.
Get up, DeSantis. We're running out of time.
Austin blinked, finding General Ferguson leaning over him. He lay on the floor of the observation room. He could see the command center through the two-way mirror behind the general. What happened? How did I get in here?
You fainted. I brought you in. Can you stand?
Austin wobbled as he got to his feet, General Ferguson helping him up. He inadvertently put his weight on his sprained ankle, but was surprised to feel no pain.
I had the medic injected with cortisone while you were unconscious. You should be able to stand on it.
Austin stepped back, putting equal weight on both feet. How long was I out?
Too long.
It was just General Ferguson and him in the room. He could see through the two-way mirror that the map was back up on the central monitor, the red having filled in most of the archipelagos of Tan in the southern half of Saudi Arabia.
The Saudi counterattack failed. The aliens were able to divert the Saudi ICBMs, sent them drifting off harmlessly into space. They never stood a chance.
Taking a few steps forward, Austin noticed the taste of bile in his mouth. Why did you bring me here?
I couldn't have an unconscious man in my command center.
No. Austin dusted off his pants. Why did you show me all of this? Walking over to the two-way mirror, General Ferguson gazed into the command center with his hands behind his back.
Those 5 years leading up to the alien arrival, we were closer to the brink than you'll ever know. It was every country for itself.
General Ferguson turned to face Austin.
But there was one mantra that everyone paid lip service to. An attack on one is an attack on all. The minute the aliens started firing, no matter whom they targeted, we would all fire back. Humanity's last stand.
General Ferguson's head fell.
Empty words, DeSantis. That's all they ever were. And after Jerusalem, when the aliens didn't destroy a dozen cities after the Palestinian Authority launched rockets at them, it became official U.S. policy. We would wait to see if the alien response was limited before fighting back. No matter how many of our species were butchered, so long as it wasn't us, we'd simply watch. Watch as Arabia bleeds.
Austin looked at the map, the nation stained red. That's why you showed me this? To remind me that we never stood a chance? Turning from the mirror, General Ferguson put his hands on Austin's shoulders.
You needed to see what unfettered power looks like. The power to kill millions, but still choose down to the single solitary individual who lives and who dies. It's the power of God.
General Ferguson was only a few inches from Austin's face, his narrow eyes peering into his core, and Austin felt like he finally understood the man, finally saw why he was the way that he was. You were right, he said, removing General Ferguson's hands from his shoulders. I was just too blind to see it. Austin waited for the general's lips to curl up into his feline smile, but his face was still, lips unmoving.
I didn't bring you here to tell me I'm right. I never had any doubt that I was. I brought you here to remind you that only you can balance the scales of power and put an end to this madness.
All the memories of General Ferguson calling him his weapon flooded back into his mind. He'd never wanted it, never really believed it, but his ears were beginning to open. How?
The robot.
Austin could see the pale blue light of Virgil in his mind's eye, its glare cutting through the mist. Virgil?
Yes. We need you to make the aliens feel vulnerable, just like us humans.
Austin looked at him like he was insane. By killing?
If necessary.
Austin imagined it. The sands of Arabia scattered with pilgrims, their blood a down payment on the infinite debt they had to pay. As he did, the kind old man crept into his head, looking up at Austin, pleading, before his brains were scattered all over his immaculate floor. I don't want to kill. I can't be party to that again. General Ferguson took a deliberate step toward him.
Power only understands power, DeSantis. Sometimes there is no other way.
Austin thought about the power of the Pilgrims, their massive spaceship, the mysteries of their church. There was no power humanity could bring that could match it. What about talking? Austin asked, the memory of Virgil rescuing him, his haptic embrace, still lingering despite the carnage.
Look at the screens, DeSantis.
General Ferguson pointed back into the command center.
Do they look like a race that responds to talking?
Through the two-way mirror, Austin saw a live stream of a Bedouin camp. Lifeless bodies of men, women, and children all lay on the ground, tents fluttering in the breeze. Virgil said they would listen to the Pope.
There is no Pope. He's dead.
I know, Austin said, desperate to find another way. But Father Ambrose isn't. Maybe he can convince them. General Ferguson shook his head.
You and the priest already tried talking to the robot. Look what good that did.
Austin's gaze shifted to the map. The red was still spreading relentlessly. I have to try. General Ferguson walked back to the two-way mirror, looking out at the command center.
This base is still a tinderbox. If I try to clear out the regulars waiting for confession outside the priest's trailer, there will be a shootout. We don't have time for that. In less than 45 minutes, Saudi Arabia will be totally consumed.
Austin walked over to stand next to General Ferguson. Then I'll do it. Alone. General Ferguson looked at him, sizing him up and down.
It's a noble thought, DeSantis, but it's no use.
Maybe, Austin said, as he focused on the Bedouin camp on the monitor, a little boy in the foreground, his eyes wide open to the sky. But I have to try. Chapter 29. Austin stood amid the devastation of the fairway, the barricades broken, bodies strewn about. Even with the help of the rebellious regulars, the crowd had been no match for the power of the blackshirts, their fruitless incursion brought to an ignominious end. They were trying to get to the cylinder, trying to see God. Little did they know there was no God inside that steel pillar, just cruel aliens who rained down death from on high.
If anything so much as twitches from that cylinder, we're opening fire,
the blackshirt commander said. Austin nodded and then walked forward without a word. Its walls folded away as he approached, and the sound of 1,000 guns cocking filled the air around him. He left them behind as he stepped inside the dark hall and walked to the Victorian living room. Virgil was kneeling in the center, his hands clasped in prayer.
Virgil, I need to talk to you.
The robot was silent, his head casting crimson rays off the gold-inlaid ceiling.
Virgil!
Austin shouted. When Virgil didn't respond, Austin moved closer, reaching out his hand to wrap his head like Father Ambrose had done. But before his hand connected, one of Virgil's metal hands shot up and grabbed his arm. The domed head changed from crimson to pale blue. Austin shrieked, but he felt no pain. The grip was soft, and the haptic touch soothing. Austin was instantly transported back to the narthex when he was lost in that mist, consigned to suffer with his demons for all eternity. When out of the nothingness came Virgil. This was his friend, and if anyone could help, it was him.
I was praying for the souls in Saudi Arabia,
Virgil said in his sweet voice,
that they may have repose.
The Pilgrims have to stop, Virgil, Austin pleaded, looking into Virgil's dome with a mixture of desperation and hope. They have to stop now, while there are still people left to save.
The war will be complete in approximately 28 minutes,
Virgil replied, the rhythm of his voice noticeably slower.
Then Michael will declare a peace.
Austin pulled his arm out of Virgil's grip.
This isn't war! It's a slaughter! Children, Virgil! You're killing children! I saw it with my own eyes!
Virgil remained kneeling.
I know, Austin. All we can do now is pray.
A metallic taste filled Austin's mouth.
Pray? That's your answer to mass murder!
Virgil was silent, only the pale blue glow of his head an answer.
Now, Virgil, you need to stop the killing now!
I cannot, Austin.
Virgil stood up.
That is not my choice. It is Michael's, and he is firm.
Austin's legs began to move, his anger driving them onward.
Then tell Michael he has to nunc descendere. You're violating the commandments. Remember, thou shalt not kill? He is making himself. No. He's making all of the pilgrims into hypocrites.
Virgil drooped his domed head. His movement sent a spark of hope through Austin that he might be getting through to him.
God have mercy on us if he is,
Virgil replied, unmistakable sadness in his voice.
What do you mean, if? Millions of innocent people just had their lives snuffed out. If Michael believed in God, he would stop this instant.
It is war, Austin.
Virgil raised his head back up.
To kill is the nature of war.
Austin's hand raised, the primal urge to strike his friend strong, but he resisted.
This isn't war! It's vengeance! A crazy prince killed your pope, and so you're slaughtering his innocent subjects as payback!
No, Austin.
The pleading in Virgil's voice was like a splash of cold water on Austin's face.
It is not vengeance. It is defense. Quadrillions of souls are at stake.
Quadrillions?
Austin seethed.
Yes, Austin.
The pale blue in Virgil's dome shifted, playing a video. Austin tilted his head, caught off guard by this seemingly new ability on Virgil's part. But as the image moved, his eyes focused, trying to discern what he was seeing. Thousands of little black dots appeared in front of a red-orange sun, small shadows against its nuclear furnace. As the image zoomed in, Austin realized that the little dots were an uncountable number of space stations, each with ornate rotating portions. Small ships raced between the stations, or at least Austin thought they were small until the image zoomed in further and he saw how immense they were.
This is the Pilgrim home system. From our moons to our Lagrange points, it is filled with life.
Austin's clenched hands loosened as he stared into Virgil's dome. The video had zoomed into the closest rotating habitat. He was now looking at an electric blue ocean, so crisp that he could almost feel the waves lapping on his arms. The water was crisscrossed by an archipelago, the land a swell of color. Zooming in on one of the islands, Austin could see that it was covered in flora that stretched as high as the tallest skyscraper, with leaves that had more colors than a rainbow. At the base of those trees were thousands of structures made of the same silvery metal as Virgil that connected directly into the ocean, as if the water was their bloodstream, breathing life into the buildings.
The Pilgrims never had religion. God was a mere philosophical concept, an explanation for the continued existence of reality, a primal cause, but nothing more. But when we saw the data from Earth, we were confronted with a difficult truth.
The image changed to pilgrims gathered around a hologram, reviewing the video of the resurrection Austin had seen in the chancel.
The creator and sustainer of the cosmos was a proximal reality, and the Pilgrims had been ignoring him, devoting themselves entirely to their pleasure, neglecting the state of their souls.
Austin could now see a massive gathering of the Pilgrims standing on a grassy plain somewhere on one of their rotating habitats. Their pale skin was pigmenting in various shapes and figures, all in unison, all of them speaking as one. Then, one at a time, they knelt and made the sign of the cross.
Our only hope was to reconcile with him, to travel to his church and partake in the sacraments, thereby saving our souls from perdition.
Austin blinked as Virgil's head returned to a pale blue.
But now the church is in danger, its very existence jeopardized. That is why Michael wages war.
He had forgotten his anger amid his awe. To see the Pilgrim home system, to realize that the massive ship in orbit was but an insignificant fraction of this ancient race. It overwhelmed him. There were so many questions Austin wanted to ask, so many mysteries he wanted to have revealed. But then the image of the dead girl staring up into the security camera came back into his mind. "How many thousands died in the time it took you to give me that speech?" he said, the metallic taste growing in his mouth.
Too many.
"Then stop!" Austin stormed toward the couches by the fireplace.
We can't stop, Austin.
Virgil followed Austin across the room.
Prince Khalid was not alone. He had confederates. They killed the Pope and half of the College of Cardinals, but they wanted to destroy the entire apostolic succession by murdering all the bishops. If they succeeded, the connection to the sacraments would be severed forever. Humanity, pilgrim kind, all sapient life in the universe would be consigned to darkness. An uncountable number of souls separated from God. Michael felt he had no choice but to act.
By killing innocent people. By killing children.
The neurotoxin is painless,
Virgil said, seeming to shrink from Austin.
They felt nothing. We took care to spare those who repented, those who knew Christ or turned toward him at the end.
Austin's vision started to go red. He wanted to rush at Virgil, pummel him. But he took out his rage on the Victorian sofa instead, flipping it over as he let out an animal roar. They felt terror. You could see it on their little faces, right up to the minute of their death. They felt a horror no human should feel. The outburst extinguished his rage, leaving him nothing but the ashes of despair. He collapsed to the ground, exhausted, as the fight left him.
I know, Austin. There is no good way to take life, no matter how sophisticated the technology.
Curling his knees into his chest, tears poured from his eyes. The futility of what he was trying to do was catching up with him.
Why do it? Why not just kill those responsible for Rome? Why hurt those children?
Virgil glided over to Austin and sat down next to him on the floor.
It was considered, but Michael is firm, and he thought it would only embolden other malcontents, knowing that there was such a limited price to pay for imperiling all sapient life in the universe.
Virgil's words fanned the embers of Austin's still smoldering rage.
Limited? Michael thought it would have been too limited to spare the children?
Yes,
Virgil replied as he lowered his domed head.
Before the Pilgrims found the Lord and learned the error of our ways, the Pilgrims had war. This is how war was fought from time immemorial, leaving none of the opponent alive.
Austin was almost too stunned to respond.
But now you found the Lord, isn't that right, Virgil? How does Michael justify total annihilation now?
Virgil sat there, silent. Austin waited, but the robot still didn't speak, like he was holding something back.
Tell me, Virgil! How do you justify genocide now?
Austin shrieked, the spit from his exhortations landing on Virgil's pale blue dome.
Michael says humans are a primitive species, that they only know force. And so he issued the command.
What command?
Virgil pointed his dome at Austin.
Tell me!
Virgil spoke, his usually steady voice cracking.
Arabia delinda est.
The words sucked the air out of Austin's lungs.
Arabia must be destroyed.
Austin could barely say it.
Do you agree with this, Virgil?
He asked, a chill going up his spine. Virgil turned his entire body toward Austin, as if he were looking him in the eye.
No,
Virgil replied firmly.
If the good thief who was crucified next to our Lord and Savior can come to know him even at the last moment of his life, then there is always hope that man can have a change of heart, that he can repent. And so we must preserve life, endeavor to protect it unless all other means of justice are exhausted.
Relief flooded through Austin at his friend's words. He may have only been a machine, but he knew goodness. And just like Austin, he was a victim of the same soul-crushing circumstances.
Then plead with Michael. Tell him to spare those who remain, even if it's just the children, before it's too late.
Virgil again lowered his domed head.
I have tried, Austin. Many, many times. But he is firm.
Virgil's voice was fleeting, resigned.
There isn't anything I can do.
As Austin looked at his friend, realization began to sink in. Virgil was a robot, built to serve the Pilgrims, and no matter how magnificent his capabilities, he was still just a pawn, forced to do what his betters told him to. Just like Austin.
Is there no one who could have saved those people?
Austin asked rhetorically, not expecting a response.
His Holiness, Pope Stephen,
Virgil answered, the hopelessness dripping off his words.
But Prince Khalid killed him. May God rest his soul.
So this was it. Michael, a creature with unlimited power, bound by nothing, orbiting Earth. General Ferguson's warnings echoed in Austin's head. He'd seen this coming, the inevitable consequence of unbridled power. Austin had been too blinded by his budding friendships to recognize what was really at stake.
There really is nothing to be done,
Austin said, feeling empty.
We must pray, Austin, pray for the souls in Saudi Arabia. And pray for our own.
Gracefully resuming his kneeling position, Virgil made the sign of the cross and then clasped his hands. Austin stood up and looked at his friend. This beautiful creature, its artificial mind somehow managing to be much wiser and gentler than the wicked minds that created it. He thought about the vile pilgrims, an advanced race of murderers, wrapping themselves in the cloak of God. As Austin exited the living room, he knew that there was only one path forward: to disempower the mighty and lay them low as Austin felt now in the pits of futility and despair. Austin would finally become what General Ferguson had always been sculpting him to be, his righteous weapon. And no mercy for the wicked would be had.